Hey everyone, this is What If Fan bringing you another part of What If There Was a Different Luffy. You can find the fanfic title and the original author's name in the description below. Please make sure to support the creator. If you enjoy the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, a quick update, this story What If There Was a Different Luffy is going on hold soon, as we have almost caught up with the author. So once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the next project should be on this channel. I'm currently deciding between these three fanfics. What if Ichigo awoke his true powers? What if Mangaka in One Piece world? What if Reborn is Gohan in future timeline? I will be setting up a poll for this, so please vote in the poll and let me know which story you'd like to see next on the channel. Alright, let's jump into it. Chapter 441, Mysterious Shichibukai 02. Third-person POV. New word. At the end, they were accompanied by the Shichibukai, who led them to a part of the island where the man had left his ship. Luffy asked him to let them use his vessel to continue their journey. What an ugly ship! Lucy stopped in front of it and exclaimed, staring at the overly extravagant thing. The ship was made of gold and adorned with precious stones. The worst part was that it had the head of a world noble, even wearing an astronaut's helmet, entirely crafted in the aesthetic of the Tenryubito. Yet, there were attempts to poorly disguise it, and anyone with 2 brain cells could see through the pathetic attempt. The man had placed a hat over the Tenryubito's head, sunglasses over the astronaut's helmet, and a scarf around its neck in a weak effort to conceal the identity. Luffy stared at it, his mouth slightly open, unable to believe what he was seeing. Can this guy really be so dumb and shameless at the same time? Couldn't he have just taken another ship and left this one behind? Luffy thought, observing the design that blatantly revealed who the owner was. The man seemed displeased by Lucy's comment, unwilling to accept anyone daring to insult his ship, something he considered a masterpiece among the Tenryubito, enough to make his peers envious. How dare you speak about my ship like that, you damn HM? He couldn't even finish his sentence because Luffy suddenly looked at him, releasing an immense pressure. What did you just say? Luffy asked sharply, his piercing gaze stopping the man in his tracks and making his eyes widen. This holy knight, even as one of the 7 most powerful, possessing strength equivalent to an admiral, knew it wasn't enough to confront the man in front of him. Besides, he had an urgent mission. Damn it, focus on the mission, he murmured internally, feeling nervous. His lips began trembling, but he forced a smile, as if slapping his own Tenryubito pride. Forgive me if my ship doesn't please you, Miss Lucy, he said, each word sounding like a knife stabbing his heart. Speaking to someone so beneath him was humiliating. Oh, no problem, dude. You're really kind, Lucy said with an enthusiastic smile. Anyway, I still think this ship is horrible, a baka ship, she added, keeping her smile as if she hadn't just insulted him. The Shichibukai debated internally whether or not he should kill the girl, but with Luffy there, he knew he had to tread carefully. Remember the mission, he repeated to himself, forcing another smile to mask his frustration. Luffy observed the entire exchange and simply sighed. Let's go. Anyway, are we continuing on your ship or not? I'm getting a bit tired of flying, Luffy said, feigning nonchalance. The man quickly nodded. Of course, let's proceed. And so, everyone boarded the bizarre ship. Where's the kitchen? Lucy asked immediately. The Shichibukai, feeling immense nervousness at the thought of someone inferior touching his precious ship, hesitated once again, but under Luffy's sharp gaze, he quickly gestured with his hand. It's right over there, Miss Lucy. Please, make yourself at home, he murmured, trying to sound amiable. Lucy darted off, already starving, without even asking her brother for her bag of meat, preferring to grab things quickly from the kitchen. Well, let's get started, Luffy said seriously, turning to the man. You sought me out to join my crew. But tell me, exactly, why do you want to abandon the government and join me, a criminal wanted across the world and, as far as I know, the most wanted man alive right now? Luffy asked, maintaining a firm tone and staring at him with sharp eyes. Lord Luffy, I am a great admirer of your work over the past years, the man began, forcing a smile that barely concealed his tension. I follow each of your feats. I would very much like to be recruited and follow you, he continued, but the lack of sincerity in his words was evident even to someone who didn't use observation hockey. I already have a fan club in my fleet. I don't need another one. Tell me the real reason you want to join my crew. Don't give me this foolish talk, Luffy said in a not-so-friendly tone, staring him down. He wanted to test how far the man would go. The Shichibukai looked at him, a little concerned, but eventually nodded. I'd like to expose myself to the world government, he replied, lying once again. Luffy raised an eyebrow, wondering what excuse the man would come up with now, and continued. Tell me more about that, he said, as the man seemed to debate with himself about what to say. Inside, the Shichibukai thought, I want to join your crew to steal information and pass it on to my superiors before we destroy all of you. I also plan to kill you and your sister, you damned inferior beings who dare to challenge us Shichibukai. The true gods of this world. If he had been honest, that's what he would have said. Instead, he swallowed hard and kept speaking in a much more polite tone to mask his true intentions, scratching his hands as if in submission. I had some issues with the powerful and divine Tenryubito, he began, while Luffy looked at him as if he were an idiot, clearly not hiding his Tenryubito pride. But Luffy let him continue, watching him closely. My family was killed. I know you're a hero to many after finally taking revenge on the powerful Tenryubito, and I'd like to help you take them down, he said. But the feelings behind his words were completely opposite to what he was saying. Let me join. Let me join, you bastard. I'll kill you. This was the man's true thought as he waited for Luffy's response, who seemed to cross his arms and think about what he had heard. Well, I might accept you, but first, you'll have to pass a test, Luffy finally said. What kind of test would that be, Lord Luffy? I'm ready to follow you at any moment, he replied immediately. Good, that's great, since we're leaving right now, Luffy said with a smile. Wait, leaving? Lord Luffy, aren't you going to Wano? The man asked, a little cautiously. Luffy shook his head. No, I don't plan to go to Wano. That was just bait for the world government, he said calmly, lying to the liar, of course. The man nodded, keeping this information to himself, thinking about how he could pass it on to his superiors later. Besides, Luffy continued. I still don't know your name, he said. You don't know? The man seemed very offended. He had been saying his name all month trying to get in touch, and it was plastered in the newspapers as a Shichibukai. It was impossible for Luffy not to know his name, and he felt extremely insulted. But the disguised Holy Knight tried to control his anger, scratching his throat as he spoke in a gentle tone. I am Saint. I mean, Elmer, just Elmer, he said, a bit nervous after nearly letting his Tenryubito name slip. Luffy nodded anyway. Then I want you to do something immediately, set the ship on this course, he said, handing an eternal pose to the man before heading to the kitchen to meet his sister, leaving the Shichibukai alone. The man looked at both the eternal pose and Luffy's back disappearing into the kitchen. Once alone, he gritted his teeth, openly displaying his anger, gripping the eternal pose furiously. He hated receiving orders from someone he considered inferior and was about to smash the object, letting his rage boil over, but a voice stopped him. Hey, don't even think about breaking that, Luffy's voice came from inside the kitchen, making the man freeze. He quickly lowered the eternal pose and forced a well-behaved smile. Of course, Lord Luffy. I'll head there, as you wish, he replied, trying to maintain his composure despite the seething anger inside him. Maintaining an animated but clearly fake expression, the man steered the ship away from the island and began setting it on the indicated route, as Luffy had ordered. It was only after the man finally set the ship on course away from the island that he returned to the kitchen to check on his guests. What he found there was chaotic and disrespectful. While Luffy sat at the table reading the day's newspaper, catching up on more news and rumors about his supposed trip to Wano, as well as reports of kings approaching Mary Geos and others already arriving, his sister stood in front of the refrigerator, devouring everything he had stocked there. All the extremely expensive and luxurious foods the man had stored before leaving Mary Geos were disappearing bite by bite into the rubber girl's stomach, which had now swollen into a temporary bloated sphere, making her look comically overweight. These weren't just any foods, they were rare delicacies he could not procure anywhere else in this sea. They hailed from all the blues, the most appetizing and expensive dishes imaginable, worthy of a Tenryubito's meal. And now, he was losing it all. This infuriated him. At that moment, driven by his rage, seeing an inferior like Lucy innocently devouring everything, he began to walk toward her, teeth clenched. Lucy noticed him with a confused look, sensing his anger with her haki. But before Almer could get any closer, the newspaper came flying at him, smacking him in the face. "Hey, can you tell me what you think about this?" Luffy asked, still calm, trying to avoid killing the Tenryubito too soon. After all, if he attacked his sister, it would be a painful death for him. The man tried to calm himself, reminded of Luffy's presence, and picked up the newspaper. The headlines were about the king's meeting. This, Lord Luffy. He seemed a bit lost before replying, but once again adopted a submissive tone. Well, it's a world government meeting to maintain their authority and power. All those kings and queens must obey the mighty and divine Tenryubito, he said with arrogance. Lucy, across the kitchen, was inspired by the man's behavior, finding him a complete idiot. Luffy, on the other hand, debated whether he should kill him earlier than planned. Despite being an arrogant fool, he also found him entertaining. After all, it wasn't every day you saw a Tenryubito trying to become your subordinate. Well, I think this meeting will be historic for this era. I've heard some rumors that the Shichibukai program might be abolished during this gathering, Luffy commented calmly. The man looked stunned. Wait, how do you? How does Lord Luffy know that? He exclaimed, astonished. Lucy raised an eyebrow, confused. What's with the surprise? She asked as she stood, biting into a pink lobster straight from the South Blue, a rarity that only produced 10 kilograms per year. About that. I'm just a bit surprised, he tried to compose himself. Are you sure about this, Luffy? He asked, ignoring Lucy since getting angry at her now would be pointless, no matter how much she was devouring what he considered precious. Well, I know some interesting things. If you pass the test, I might even tell you, Luffy said in a casual tone. The man quickly nodded. Of course, Lord Luffy. I am at your service, he replied, forcing a friendly smile. Even his veins of rage subtly appeared on his forehead while watching Lucy return to the fridge to consume whatever was left. Luffy wanted to laugh at the situation. He found it all incredibly amusing, so long as the man didn't cross the line by trying to attack his sister. They had plenty of fun as they continued along the route, so Luffy quickly sped up the ship. He wanted to reach Zephyr, the Black Fist, as soon as possible. Luffy had a problem. He knew that, at this moment, something grand was being plotted, something capable of creating massive chaos in the New World and potentially causing the planet's destruction if left unchecked. If Zephyr succeeded, there was no one currently in a position to stop it. The timeline had already been disrupted since Luffy's interference during the Marineford War. That was why Luffy had to act on his own, steering away from the fleet headed to Wano. After all, even as a pirate, the New World was now his home, and he wouldn't allow it to be destroyed. Chapter 442 Neo Marine 01. Third-person POV. New word. In the middle of a location in the New World, there was an island being used as a base by the Neo Navy. The island had a somewhat gloomy and gray atmosphere, with the sky covered by dark clouds. At the center of the island stood a robust, fortified installation. Inside, men and women worked tirelessly, moving metal crates containing a rare and explosive material known as dynastones. In other words, explosives. Lots of explosives. Zephyr, now a former admiral of the Navy who referred to himself as Z, stood atop a metal platform, observing the activity below with cold eyes, lost in thought about his plans. Instead of the Navy uniform he once wore, he now donned an outfit that matched his current black cape, adorned with the symbol of his personal crusade, a crusade that symbolized nothing less than the complete destruction of the pirate system and the world government that had betrayed him. His den musharang at that moment. He raised it to listen to his subordinates. Sir, we are ready to transport the shipment of dynastones directly to the first endpoint. The destruction will reach an area of at least 5 surrounding islands. It will be devastating. Zephyr did not respond immediately. His gaze shifted back to the ship being loaded before he finally replied. That is not enough, he said gravely. I want the entire world to see that the monsters they created cannot be controlled. I want fear to consume every corner of the new world. But, sir, if we increase the range, it could include innocent kingdoms. Many lives could be lost. The Den Musha conveyed a hint of hesitation at the leader's proposal. Innocent people? Zephyr thought. There was a time when he might have cared about such concerns, but now he believed sacrifices were necessary to achieve lasting peace in this world. He then gave his response, his tone firm. There are no innocents in this world. They are all complicit, whether through fear, greed, or complacency. Never forget that we are liberating the world from this evil. While all eyes are on the war between the Yonkou and the meeting of the kings at Mariewa, we will be creating a better world. He concluded his statement. The person on the Den Musha swallowed hard and acknowledged the order without further objection. They hung up, knowing that the calculations for destruction would now be adjusted. Zephyr's plan was straightforward: detonate the 3 endpoints in the new world using the Dynastones he had obtained over the past year. By obliterating these 3 locations while keeping the world's attention diverted to other events, he could act much faster. Zephyr's eyes gleamed as he thought about the cursed pirates known as the Yonkou fighting each other. He would surprise them with the cataclysmic chain reaction caused by the explosions, which would spread through the volcanic areas, annihilating the entire new world. He would kill them all. All 5 Yonkou would be dead before the world even realized what was happening. This will be the first step toward a new world, Zephyr murmured to himself as he walked. A world where corruption will be consumed by fire, he said, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Quickly, 4 ships bearing the Neo Navy's flag were stationed at the base's port. Men continued loading the ships with more explosives than initially planned. Zephyr boarded the main ship as his men worked. 2 of his top students were on the deck, overseeing everything, and the moment they noticed their master, they swiftly approached, striking a salute. They were Ein and Bins. Greetings, Master Z, they said in unison. Zephyr, or Z, nodded as he passed by them, walking toward the other side of the ship to gaze at the ocean. The weather seemed to darken further, signaling an approaching storm. The laws of pirates are simple: the strong shape the world, and the weak are nothing but ashes in the wind. This storm will mark our first act, and the new world, along with its evil, will vanish in another, even greater one, of fire. Zephyr spoke these words without hesitation, and his subordinates behind him nodded, resolute in following their master's lead. Many other students had been invited to join him, but none accepted when he left. However, the other subordinates handling the loading were all former Marines who believed the government's navy was corrupt. Everything seemed calm until, suddenly, Zephyr narrowed his eyes toward the sea. Ein also noticed something and turned to a man guarding a crate. Hey, you! Grab your spyglass and look at the sea immediately, she ordered. The man looked confused but quickly fetched the spyglass from his belt and peered out over the water. His expression quickly turned to shock. There's a ship coming this way. And that flag, it belongs to the Divine Admiral, the man exclaimed, prompting raised eyebrows from everyone nearby. It's a Shichibukai's ship, someone shouted. Ein frowned. How the hell did they find us here? Master Z. She murmured, her gaze falling on Z, who was staring intently at the approaching ship, his eyes glinting. A Shichibukai. He murmured to himself, his tone dripping with disdain. That damned government wastes no time, does it? Even so, we shouldn't have been found so easily. Quick, prepare to destroy that ship. The men sprang into action, readying the 4 massive Neo Navy ships and aiming their cannons toward the sea. What should we do, Master Z? Bins asked, while Zephyr kept his gaze locked on the ship. Sink it, Z commanded. The enemy ship continued speeding toward the island, moving far faster than any ordinary vessel. It soon entered the cannon's range, and in the next moment, the cannons of all 4 Neo Navy ships roared as they fired, their shots exploding with force and racing toward the target. But something strange happened. As the cannonballs were about to hit, the ship suddenly veered to the side in an almost unnatural manner. What is that? How can a ship dodge? Everyone watched in stunned disbelief. More and more cannonballs were fired, but none hit the ship. It continued advancing in a zigzag pattern, evading every attack as it drew closer. Boom! 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 TSK. At this rate, nothing will work, Z clicked his tongue in irritation, watching the ship effortlessly avoid the attacks. Resolving to take matters into his own hands, he strode to the center of the ship. Raising his mechanical arm, he struck one of the crates they had been transporting. Everyone watched in surprise as Z acted, retrieving a capsule containing a Dynastone, which pulsed like a heartbeat within its container. Master Z. Ayn murmured, stunned, as she watched Z break the capsule. Her shock grew, contact with air would make the stone explode. As the stone began to glow and expand, he gripped it tightly and aimed at the ship. Let's see you escape this, he said before hurling the stone toward the Shichibukai ship. The Dynastone flew rapidly toward the ship, which this time remained still. As the stone neared, it began to shine and expand, finally detonating right in front of the enemy vessel. In the next moment, a blinding flash engulfed everything, making the storm-darkened new world shine as brightly as day. Then came the deafening explosion as the area before them erupted in chaos. Boom! Despite being half a kilometer away from the explosion, all the ships and the island itself trembled as the Dynastone unleashed its destructive power, devastating the sea ahead. The sheer force of just one fragment of its potential was staggering, and they had plans to use hundreds of these stones to achieve their objectives at the endpoints. As everyone tried to shield themselves, raising their arms against the force of the explosion, Z stood watching with a satisfied look, imagining the devastation his plan would cause at the volcanic points he intended to destroy. But his eyes soon narrowed. The sea began to reappear, revealing a massive crater of water that quickly refilled as the ocean rushed back into place. However, there was no sign of the Shichibukai ship. Suddenly, Z's gaze shifted upward. A figure descended from the sky at an incredible speed, landing with such force on the deck that part of the structure behind Z was destroyed in a powerful blast. Surprised, he turned to see who the intruder was. His eyes quickly scanned the person who had just landed amidst the cloud of dust. Ayn and Benz, now on high alert, readied themselves to confront the invader, while the other Neo-Navy members formed ranks, aiming their weapons and drawing swords, acting as disciplined Marines do. It's been a long time since I last saw you, even before you betrayed the organization, Z murmured, studying the figure. As the dust began to settle, a young girl with black hair came into view. Z's eyes narrowed. Lucy. He muttered, recognizing his former Marineford pupil, who had abandoned the Navy to join her pirate brother. Hello, Z-sensei, Lucy greeted, staring directly at him. Yes, it has been a long time. Her voice, however, lacked the playful and calm tone it once had. Instead, every word carried a weight of seriousness. So, you're with the Shichibukai? Z asked, a flicker of confusion in his voice. To him, it would have made more sense for her to be elsewhere. She should have been fighting alongside her brother. It's hard to explain, Lucy replied. But I'm here for one thing. I want to know something, and I'd like you to be honest. Z remained silent, his gaze fixed on her, and she continued. Do you plan to destroy the New World? She asked directly, her expression growing even more severe. How do you know that? Z raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. This plan had been in the works for over a year. No one should have known about it except his most trusted subordinates. Luffy told me, Lucy said candidly. So, he knew. Z murmured, his expression darkening. A shadow of concern passed over his face. If Luffy was aware of his plan, though Z couldn't fathom how, there might be a traitor among his ranks. But that didn't matter now. If Luffy himself was present, it could prove troublesome, even for him. Despite this, he regarded his former pupil with a serious expression and confirmed. Yes, it's true. I plan to destroy the New World. That includes you, your brother, and every pirate. I see, Lucy murmured to herself, glancing around at the Neo-Navy members who were preparing to attack at any moment. Her gaze sharpened, becoming even fiercer as she looked back at her old sensei. Then I'm here to stop you, Z-sensei, she declared, and an explosion of haki emanated from her, unleashing a crushing wave of her sovereign aura. Everyone around felt the overwhelming pressure of her willpower. Chapter 443, Neo Marine 02. Third-person POV. New word. Lucy simply unleashed her haki like a wave of force and lightning from the Conqueror, sweeping in all directions and striking everything around her. Zephyr, with an expressionless look behind his glasses, remained unfazed, but the same could not be said for his subordinates. Ain and Bins quickly raised their hands, feeling the immense pressure emanating from Lucy. Although they endured the haki with some difficulty, others were not as resilient. Shuzo, Alpacachino, Shirokuma, and all the other members of the Neo Marines quickly rolled their eyes back and began collapsing, one by one. Z remained silent. Despite losing all his subordinates, he knew there was nothing else to do after Lucy unleashed her strength. His eyes locked onto Lucy, who stared intensely at him following her explosion of power. "Why are you doing this? You should be like me, or would have been, but you chose to join an evil pirate crew like your brothers. So, you're just as bad as them, Lucy. And yet you're here, trying to lecture me?" Zephyr asked in an angry tone. "You think the fact that I'm with my brother is worse than you wanting to destroy multiple kingdoms at once, Sensei?" Lucy replied, equal anger etched on her face. "Their deaths are necessary to create a better world." Z retorted firmly. "I may have left the Marines without you, but I still have a sense of justice. Even if I'm flying a pirate flag beside my brother, I still desire a better world. And Luffy is not the monster you think he is." Lucy replied, staring directly at him. Ain and Bins quickly prepared to fight, positioning themselves behind Lucy while she stood firm, staring Z down without flinching. "You don't understand, girl. I think you've become a pirate too, Lucy. And I'm going to have to destroy you here because now you're part of that group of monsters." Z shouted, showing his dissatisfaction. The next moment, he clenched his fists and charged directly at Lucy. She didn't stand still. Her fists turned black with armament haki, meeting Z's attack head-on. The instant their fists collided, a massive explosion of haki erupted, catching even Ain and Bins by surprise and preventing them from getting closer to the two. "You've certainly become very powerful. Much more than I could have predicted," Z admitted, surprised by Lucy's current strength. Her mastery of haki was impressive, almost inexplicable for someone to achieve in just a year and a few months. "I'm stronger than that. Don't underestimate me, Sensei," Lucy replied, keeping her fist firm against his. Bit by bit, she began to overpower him, which made Z slightly raise his eyebrows before being hurled backward. He felt the force of the impact and noticed that part of the armor on his mechanical arm was slightly dented. Z nearly fell into the sea but managed to stabilize himself, using his Jeppo to quickly lift himself into the air. He flew into the sky, while Lucy kept her eyes fixed on him, ready for his next move. Z was feeling a bit frustrated. He was supposed to begin his mission on this day, but he was already being thwarted by Lucy. As he surveyed the situation, his gaze fell on the area where the explosion had occurred, where Lucy's ship should have been docked. What he found, however, were several pieces of the broken ship, proving it had been destroyed. Even so, Lucy had managed to reach him, dodging his explosion without him noticing how. He wondered if she was alone but dismissed the thought, focusing his attention back on the ship he was on. "Ain. Bins. Attack her now," Zephyr ordered firmly. The two apprentices charged at Lucy immediately, but she simply disappeared, her skin turning pink and steaming. In just a moment, she vanished, and before the two could react, Lucy was already behind them. "As I thought, your level is far beyond expectations," murmured Zephyr as he observed the scene. He showed concern, realizing that Lucy had already reached the level of a Yonko commander, or perhaps something even worse. "No more observing. I'll have to deal with this personally," exclaimed Zephyr, charging swiftly at Lucy after she had taken down his two strongest apprentices. He raised his fist, preparing a devastating attack, while Lucy leapt backward to dodge. The impact of Zephyr's punch destroyed the ship's deck. Both quickly moved to the island, distancing themselves from the port to unleash their strength, as neither wanted to harm those already unconscious during their fight. Zephyr activated his mechanical arm, which grew in size as vibrant energy pulsed around it. "You won't escape this time," Zephyr shouted as his massive fist descended toward Lucy. Lucy, in turn, inflated her own fist by blowing into her thumb, coating it in armament hockey, and charged at Zephyr's blow. The clash between Lucy's giant fist and Zephyr's metallic one caused a devastating explosion, shaking the entire island. As the fight between Zephyr and Lucy intensified, Luffy watched everything from the sky. His eyes were focused on the battle, but his expression remained impassive. Looking toward the sea, he debated internally whether he should feel pity for the arrogant Holy Knight or not. Should I let him die in the water or not? Lucy debated. The earlier scenes were still fresh in Luffy's mind. When the Dyna Stone had been launched at the Shichibukai ship, Luffy had acted at that moment to take the guy down once and for all. He was amusing at first, but soon became irritating, with one personality being arrogantly judgmental, wanting to kill and judge him as if he were a Tenryubito, while another was submissive. When the stone exploded near him, Luffy used his ability to manipulate time, briefly paralyzing the Shichibukai, grabbing Lucy, and flying into the sky at high speed. The subsequent explosion couldn't reach them, and no one on the other side understood what had happened. The entire ship exploded with the Shichibukai at the center of the blast. Now, Luffy watched from above, seeing what was left of the Shichibukai ship sinking into the sea. Meanwhile, on the island, Lucy returned to her normal form. Her fists were coated in hockey as she charged at Zephyr with full force. The two exchanged blows everywhere, generating multiple explosions that made the ground tremble. The island began to suffer from the impacts of their battle. "You're playing with fire, Lucy," shouted Zephyr as he delivered a punch with his mechanical arm. "I won't let you continue your madness, Sensei," Lucy responded. The two continued to trade devastating blows, and their confrontation caused massive destruction in the area, demolishing several rocks as they crashed into the Neo Marine base on the island. The fight continued to break through the base until they emerged outside again, colliding with each other repeatedly, moving at high speeds. At one point, Z appeared with part of his glasses shattered. Lucy, meanwhile, decided to retrieve the Shichibukai from the sea, though she couldn't do it there. Descending to the Neo Marine ships as Lucy and Z moved away, Luffy grabbed one of the fallen subordinates and flew back into the sky. "Hey, you, wake up!" Luffy slapped the man's face, causing him to open his eyes abruptly. The man looked around, confused, trying to understand what was happening until he spotted Luffy. His eyes widened as he recognized him, his expression becoming even more terrified. "Listen here," Luffy said before the man could say anything. "I'm going to let you live, but only if you go to the sea and retrieve a man who's sinking there. Don't forget to put these sea stone cuffs on him. Do you understand?" As he spoke, Luffy pointed toward the sea. The man hesitated for a moment, but realizing his life was at stake, he quickly nodded. "Then go," Luffy ordered, and without hesitation, he placed the cuffs in the man's hands and pushed him toward the water. The man fell heavily into the water, screaming, but soon began swimming to complete the task Luffy had given him, believing he would die if he returned without finishing it. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupted in the middle of the island. Zephyr was flying again, hurtling toward the edge of the island and crashing into one of the Neo Marine ships at the port like a rocket. Lucy stopped nearby, watching, ready for Z to reappear at any moment. "Lucy is truly very powerful," Z's voice echoed from the debris. "Perhaps what your grandfather saw in you was right, but you strayed from the path and became what I despise the most." The next moment, Zephyr emerged from a pile of rubble, holding several capsules containing Dyna Stones he had taken from the ship. His expression was fierce, despite a streak of blood running down his forehead. "All right, let's fight seriously now," Zephyr declared, raising the capsules. Lucy, upon seeing him, had a bad feeling but prepared to fight. In the next moment, Zephyr began breaking the capsules. The Dyna Stones reacted to the oxygen as he hurled them directly at Lucy. The explosion was enormous. From afar, Luffy could see the intense light and feel the impact. Lucy managed to distance herself from the explosion, slightly injured but still steady. However, Zephyr continued throwing more stones, shouting, "I will not lose to you." Lucy retreated quickly, trying to avoid the attacks. Meanwhile, Luffy diverted his attention from the fight, now filled with explosions devastating the small island, and noticed the man emerging from the water, carrying the body of another bound with the sea stone cuffs. The man was exhausted, his expression dazed. "Thank you," Luffy said, approaching him and taking the sailor. "Just don't go near the island today. You might end up dead." The man nodded, still gasping for breath. Luffy then flew back into the sky, carrying the body while observing the chaos on the island. He noticed that numerous explosions covered almost the entire surface of the island. Suddenly, Lucy reappeared. In her Gear 4th form, she charged directly at Zephyr, her body enveloped in haki and explosive power. "Well, this looks interesting," Luffy murmured, a smile forming on his face. "Let's see how much you've grown, sister." He continued to observe from afar, a mix of pride and slight concern. Lucy was fighting for her own ideals, while Zephyr persisted in his destructive crusade. Luffy knew that what Zephyr was doing was irrational and that he himself would have to deal with it eventually. But Lucy needed this fight. If she wanted a fairer world, as she always preached, she had to prove it. So Luffy watched as she battled to protect the new world against a man scarred by the past and filled with resentment, whose personal vendetta could cause more harm to the world than any pirate ever could. Chapter 444 Government Movement Initiating. Third-person POV. New word. The fight between Lucy and Zephyr had escalated to a higher level as the battle continued to intensify even further. Lucy was in her boundman form, while Zephyr fought with all his might. However, he realized he was reaching his limit, using the Dyna Stones in an attempt to balance the fight between the two. It was a battle not just between enemies from opposing sides but also between a teacher and a student. Lucy may have trained with Garp most days in Marineford, but she received direct aid, guidance, and training from Zephyr, forging a sensei bond during the years she was in the Marines. But Lucy was no longer as she once was. She was using her ultimate transformation. Even without utilizing her full power, she was already stronger than Zephyr in this state, forcing him to retreat with every clash of their haki. Despite his experience, Zephyr no longer possessed the strength of his youth, while Lucy had reached a level far beyond what he ever imagined in just 1 year. Her agility and mobility, enhanced by her mastery of the 6 styles, far superior to what is taught in the Marines and combined with Gear 4th, made her even faster and more unpredictable to the experienced ex-admiral. The explosions continued, with Zephyr hurling Dyna Stones one after another, trying to hit Lucy. She, however, managed to evade or shield herself, leaving him frustrated. When Zephyr finally managed to land a blow on Lucy, he was stunned to realize her body bent like rubber even with haki activated, absorbing the impact with little damage. In the next moment, Lucy countered with a devastating strike, knocking Zephyr's glasses off. He retreated briefly but quickly resumed the fight while Luffy watched from a distance. Still keeping the Shichibukai tied up beside him, Luffy knew the battle wouldn't last much longer. Zephyr was already heavily damaged, while Lucy was still in good condition. During one of the explosions, Lucy, enveloped in haki, charged forward with a giant punch, one of her strongest attacks. Zephyr, in a last-ditch effort, tried to respond with all his strength focused into his mechanical arm. As the two blows collided, the pressure spread, with streams of armament haki radiating across the area. But Lucy activated her greatest strength, embedding Conqueror's haki into her punch at that moment. Her attack became so intense that Zephyr raised his eyebrows in surprise, witnessing his mechanical arm being completely destroyed without Lucy exerting much effort. The Conqueror's haki coating was something Luffy had ensured she mastered during her training. And Luffy watched as his sister struck Zephyr, her fist larger than his entire body. The impact was so devastating that Zephyr was sent flying across the island, breaking through rocks and even the base itself, before crashing into the sea, accompanied by a massive water explosion. In the midst of the devastated area, Lucy landed. She felt that Zephyr was no longer conscious and reverted to her slim form. Without wasting time, she flew back to meet Luffy, who was waiting for her in the air. "You fought well," Luffy remarked with a smile as Lucy landed beside him, sporting only a few scratches but not showing any signs of fatigue. "Yeah. I'm much stronger now, she said, clenching her fist as she looked at him, her gaze tinged with concern. Don't worry. Let's grab him and tie up the others, Luffy assured her before heading back to the ships. They grabbed one of the unconscious subordinates, waking him abruptly. You will go into the sea and retrieve your fallen commander, Luffy ordered the subordinate. With no choice, the subordinate complied. Moments later, Luffy returned with Zephyr's unconscious, cuffed body. He landed beside Lucy, who observed him curiously. When Luffy returned, he found his younger sister momentarily off guard, as Ain had regained consciousness. She caught Lucy by surprise, pointing a gun at her head while glaring at Luffy with gritted teeth, frustration evident on her face. Release Z-sensei. Or she dies, I have a sea stone bullet. Ain exclaimed. Stop this, Ain, I don't want to hurt you. Lucy said, her tone serious, though her voice sounded like a 12-year-old girl. Ain had used her ability to regress Lucy's age, something similar to what Bonnie could do, though far inferior to the distorted future powers of Bartholomew Kuma's daughter. You look just like the old days, Lucy. Adorable, Luffy said with a nostalgic tone, recalling their younger days in Goa as he looked at Lucy in this state. It's not funny, brother, Lucy complained, pouting as she considered taking Ain down for good. This is no joke. Hand over Z-sensei, quickly. Ain exclaimed again. Luffy shook his head as he looked at her. In the next moment, he unleashed his haki, overwhelming Ain. Feeling the sheer power far greater than Lucy's, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed to the ground, just as Lucy returned to her adult form. You should tie up the bodies more carefully, Luffy scolded, noticing the sloppy bindings Lucy had made, which allowed Ain to catch her off guard. I did what I could, Lucy replied with an embarrassed smile as Luffy rolled his eyes. Despite everything, Luffy couldn't help but feel proud of his sister. Quickly, he activated his Moa Moa no Mai and began moving like a flash among the bodies, securing them one by one in an instant until all were tightly restrained. What do we do now? Lucy asked, looking at Luffy. He paused for a moment before answering. Well, I hadn't planned on using this, but it could definitely come in handy. Let's gather all the Dynastones the Neo Marines have on their ships and load up all the prisoners, even those two from the sea, Luffy said, as he began organizing the Neo Marines. He grabbed the two who had just been pulled from the water and placed all the prisoners on a single ship along with their leaders and the Shichibukai, all tightly bound. Then, using his abilities, Luffy shrank the ship and put it in his pocket. Next, he began collecting all the remaining Dynastones, as well as the Neo Marines' treasures, storing everything for himself and adding points to the system. I have some plans for these guys, he commented. But for now, let's just keep them stored. And now, are we heading to Wano? Lucy asked curiously. Yeah, there's nothing else to do out here on the sea, Luffy replied. Let's get back to the others, he said. Lucy nodded, and together they flew back into the sky, increasing their speed as Luffy carried his sister. Far away, the fleet of ships continued traversing the skies, advancing toward Wano. But beneath them, amidst the ocean, unaware that several ships were flying above due to the clouds, lay vessels from the world government and the Marines. They were stationed in the water, carefully watching the calm horizon. A sailor approached a Den Den Mushi and reported. Commander, there's no sign of the Straw Hat crew. They haven't appeared yet. He informed. How is that possible? They should be following this route. They should be here any moment. Replied the voice on the other end, clearly frustrated. We'll stay here for the next few days and report if we spot them. But so far, no sign of them, the sailor continued. Very well. Notify us of anything, the commander said before disconnecting. He was in a room at HQ and turned back with a cautious expression to face Akainu, who stood beside him. The fleet admiral, however, looked visibly frustrated. Where are they now? Akainu asked, clenching his fists. They're in the air, Akainu. You should know that, replied an elderly voice from another Den Den Mushi that echoed in the room. Akainu turned to glare at the Den Den Mushi connected to the 5 elders, who were present in the room, monitoring the report. It's not like there's much we can do about it now, is there, Fleet Admiral? One of the elders added mockingly. Akainu did not respond, his expression hardening even further. Well, this is expected from them, after all, another elder commented calmly. With the power of the few Wanomi, they can move to any part of the world. Even with Wano being a closed-off country, an invader coming from the sky would have the advantage, entering the country effortlessly and gaining the element of surprise, another elder added. This leads us to the question, what are we going to do now? The fourth elder asked, his gaze serious. Saturn, his voice filled with anger and resentment from his injuries, replied, for heaven's sake, isn't it obvious? It's time to launch our attack against them. We don't know their full strength, as no one has been able to communicate with us so far, but that's no reason not to act. He spoke with determination, and the others nodded. The time to strike had come after a year of inactivity. Akainu remained silent as they discussed until Saturn made a point of addressing him directly, looking at the Den Mushi. Akainu. Stay alert. Any call from us must be answered immediately, considering we have 2 admirals out of action, one injured and another held hostage. Akainu said nothing, only listening as the Den Mushi disconnected. In the room of power, the conversation continued, covering matters Akainu was not privy to. With the ongoing meeting between the kings, it's also an opportunity to demonstrate the might of the world government against those pirates and the countries that have betrayed us. All of them must pay and be exterminated. Saturn continued with a determined look. You're not thinking of using that, are you? Someone murmured from the background. Of course not. We don't even have the authority for that, only I'm-sama does. There's no reason to resort to that now. It would draw too much attention, but we have plenty of other weapons at our disposal, Saturn replied, his eyes gleaming with malice. You know this well. One of the other elders nodded and began dialing another number. When the call connected, a nervous and submissive voice responded on the other end, yes, sir. Prepare everything. We're initiating Project Erebus, Saturn ordered. The person on the other end, still sounding nervous, replied quickly, it will be done immediately. The Den Mushi disconnected. In the next moment, the man retrieved a key from a necklace around his neck and inserted it into a lock on a panel. With a firm motion, he turned the key, revealing a button. He pressed it, and all the lights in the room, which appeared to be a command center, began flashing red. Sirens blared, and people began running back and forth, fully aware of what this meant. Project Erebus initiated. Project Erebus initiated. Project Erebus initiated. The loudspeakers repeated the name of the operation continuously. In the same base, members of CP agents from all levels were present. It seems something is about to start. Do we need to act? Kaku asked, now dressed entirely in white. I don't know. This isn't part of our protocol. We don't even know what exactly they're planning, another person responded, also dressed in white, none other than Rob Lucci. Around him, other members of CP0 were gathered on higher floors, none of them moving, as the announcement wasn't their concern. Who cares about this? We're on a mission in Neri Geos to protect the Tenryubito from any threat. Whatever this mission is, it's not ours, Stussy remarked, also dressed in white like the others. Meanwhile, in a deeper section of the base, there was a room filled with capsules. Inside the capsules, people were submerged in green liquid, breathing through apparatuses. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and dozens of devices beneath the capsules lit up and began blinking. Initiating awakening. Initiating awakening. The sounds echoed throughout the room. Slowly, inside the capsules, the eyelashes of the submerged individuals began to move. One by one, their eyes opened, glowing with vivid, diverse colors unique to each person. Chapter 445, The Beginning of the Reverie. Third-person POV. New word. In the sky, as the Straw Hat Fleet traversed the clouds, advancing at full speed toward their goal, something suddenly flew past the fleet at incredible speed, continuing ahead. A silhouette shot past the last ships, which were islands, while dinosaurs and animals glanced upward, catching a fleeting glimpse of the object thanks to their hockey. As the same object crossed the island, moving on to the next and quickly leaving it behind, it zigzagged through the ships. Everyone watched the trail it left in the sky due to its incredible speed. She. A girl's laughter echoed as she enjoyed passing through all the ships in the fleet, being pulled by her brother, moving ahead of all the ships and performing stunts above, below, and around them. Luffy flew through the fleet, flapping his wings at high speed, carrying his sister in his arms. Near the leading ship, a woman leaped off a vessel with serpents at its prow, floating in the sky. Luffy! Hancock exclaimed, advancing to intercept Luffy mid-air. He had no choice but to catch her, as she laughed excitedly. Luffy crossed a few more ships before finally landing on the one leading the fleet. With everyone's eyes on him, he appeared on the deck of the Black Pearl, slowing down to land, carrying Lucy and Hancock. His face was covered in lipstick marks from Hancock attacking him after he caught her. "You're finally here, Captain," Usopp said, approaching with a grin. "Did you handle that issue you went to resolve?" Robin asked, stepping closer to him. "Yes, Zephyr's plans won't be a problem for us or the New World anymore," Luffy said, pulling a small stone from his pocket. It was a trick he had learned some time ago. "What's that?" Chopper asked curiously. "It's Zephyr's base island." Luffy ended up shrinking the entire island. Lucy murmured, still shocked by Luffy's ability. He had already shrunk the ships, but upon seeing the island about to take off and leave, he decided to grab the whole thing. And that's exactly what he did. He shrank it so much it fit in his pocket. He thought the documents and other resources there might be useful. "Anyway, let's get ready. As I said before, the fleet will continue heading to Wano on its own, but we'll move ahead to take care of a few things since we need to handle another country before the war," Luffy explained, with everyone nodding, as he had discussed this with them beforehand. "And who's going with you, Captain?" Zoro asked. "Well, I'll take only a few people while you all organize the fleet's journey to Wano. Coming with me will be you, Zoro, my sister, Kuina, Yamato, Chachu, Nojiko, Reiju and Lami from the crew, but Sai and the samurai will join us as well. I want everyone else to wait until we reach Wano and receive further orders," Luffy said, smiling. "And are you leaving already, Luffy?" Nami asked. "Of course not. First, we're having a feast," he declared, making everyone smile. In the end, they threw another grand party, spending a day celebrating between the flagship and the other ships while Bippo continued guiding the fleet day after day. Eventually, they departed, moving toward Wano on a different ship, with Nojiko using her explosion power to propel the ship forward faster than the fleet. They planned to arrive a few days ahead of the fleet since they needed to organize an entire country. Luffy wanted Wano to fight for its own land and not simply have him solve everything for them. And so, they set off. 2 days had passed since Lucy had defeated Zephyr, and the world grew increasingly anxious to hear the next news from the major powers of this era, following Whitebeard's death. On this day, the first kings began to appear beneath Mary Geo's. "So this is the city of the gods?" A prince with an admiring gaze asked, looking at the place above the red line for the first time in his life, his eyes gleaming with greedy ambition. He observed the houses and the Tenryubito with eyes that betrayed his thoughts. He believed he could also be part of that world. "Yes, my son, but you mustn't meddle with any of the gods, or we will all be killed, and our kingdom will be destroyed," his father, the king of his realm, murmured as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world while addressing his heir. "But I want to be like them," he exclaimed before receiving a smack on the head, something that had never happened to him before. "Why did you do that?" he shouted, surprised, at his father. "Because I won't forgive you if you do something stupid that costs us everything. I know you like mistreating peasants, but I won't let you get us killed because of your sadistic nature," his father replied in a stern tone, making it clear that there were limits his son could not cross. Many other kings displayed various behaviors, but there were also those who were more serious. As the elevator platform filled with kings, King Dalton of the Drum Kingdom appeared, accompanied by an elderly woman, none other than Dr. Kureha, who walked ahead of him, looking toward the elevator leading to Mary Geo's. The Drum Kingdom had finally returned to glory after a year, with numerous doctors emerging in the past year as the country became a small power, boasting wealth, knowledge, and even military strength. It had risen from the ashes, though no one truly knew how. Not even government spies could extract anything useful. "These people are so cruel," Kureha muttered, feeling uncomfortable as she observed how the elevator operated. Slaves hidden away were pulling it. Watch your words, Dr. Kureha. We can't say anything here yet. King Dalton whispered, his tone cautionary. Fine. She sighed and returned to the Marines accompanying her. I know I'm in the bloom of youth at over 141 years old, but that doesn't mean I have to wait for you, she exclaimed, as they sighed, somewhat accustomed to her peculiar personality during the escort mission to this place. At that moment, the first ships from the Blues appeared. Governor Genzo arrived from the Kokoyasi Kingdom, soon followed by the Syrup Kingdom, with Queen Kaya accompanied by several bodyguards. Lastly, the Goa Kingdom ship arrived, bringing Queen Makino. Other kingdoms from East Blue were present as well, such as the Frost Kingdom with Queen Bandidesini. However, the other kings exchanged peculiar glances when they saw the first three kingdoms that had mysteriously gained significant political and economic power in the past year, coinciding with visits from the current Yonko, Monkey D. Luffy. Makino drew the most attention, as she was widely regarded as the wife of none other than Shanks, the red-haired. I've heard that Monkey D. Luffy and even Port Gastilles were raised in the Goa Kingdom. It's also the kingdom of the marine hero Garp and the revolutionary dragon. What kind of kingdom is this? A king remarked, intrigued as he observed the flag of one of the most talked-about kingdoms recently. The Goa Kingdom was known for its wealth, but there were no great stories of strong individuals before Luffy's emergence. Of all the blues, East Blue had always been considered the weakest sea. However, kingdoms like Goa, Kokoyasi, and Syrup were now attracting attention, as the area had become a hub of gossip over the past year. So, this is the place where those guys wearing astronaut helmets live? Makino asked curiously, pointing to the sacred city above the red line. It looks beautiful from here. She murmured in an innocent tone of admiration as she tried to get a glimpse of Mary Geos. We need to be careful with them. They're quite arrogant and probably don't view us kindly after what Luffy did. After all, it's no secret that he's from Goa, Dayton commented cautiously. Why are you just standing there, Dayton? Garp asked, giving her an unexpected slap on the back. Who the hell are you, you bastard? She shouted, startled and jumping in surprise before turning to look at him. Garp. She trembled at the sight of him on the ship without warning and quickly shut her mouth. Don't just stand there. Let's get moving. We need to escort the queen to the king's summit, Garp said. With no choice, they began walking toward the elevator, joining Queen Kaya of Syrup and the governor of Kokoyasi. They were all part of an alliance since these territories were secretly under Luffy's protection. It looks like they've started arriving. We're about to begin. Someone commented high up in the city, inside the castle's power room, where the 5 elders were gathered once more, reviewing reports of the arrival of each kingdom. We should punish the East Blue kingdoms. They are highly suspicious. Saturn's voice carried an air of arrogance as he sat in his chair in a visibly weakened state. That's no reason to attack a kingdom without justification, another elder disagreed. But it doesn't matter, as what we're about to show them will be enough to make them fear us like never before and prevent them from ever challenging the world government again, another elder stated firmly. Yes. Now, we just need to begin the meeting and broadcast it through all the Den Den Mushi transmitters to those present, another agreed. Their plans were progressing, and the ships were already sailing toward their enemies and targets. Out at sea, a distance from the Red Line, an entire fleet of ships crossed the waters, bearing the flags of the world government. They were laden with transmitters and high-ranking officials, all tied to the government. There were over 1,000 ships, all packed. Each ship carried 1 or 2 pacifistas and had a singular objective, to demonstrate to all the kings present at Mary Geos what would happen to those who defied the world government, complete eradication of the Straw Hat Crew and even 2 other Yonko. The fleet suddenly began to split, following orders from the leaders. One portion advanced toward the middle of the sea where Wano was located, while a smaller contingent moved toward the kingdoms of Dressrosa and others aligned with Luffy. This was the world government's response to the Straw Hats, a preparation for their imminent destruction. Mary Geos was fortified with equipment designed to combat meteors the Straw Hats might send. It was, at last, the opportunity the government saw to try to destroy them once and for all, without even relying on the Navy for this mission. Chapter 446 Wano 01. Third Person POV. New word. Wano was a very peculiar country, with geography that defied common logic and gravity. Surrounding it, at sea level, there were various peaks encircling the country before even reaching it. It was situated above sea level, surrounded by an imposing natural barrier formed by steep cliffs and jagged mountains, creating an insurmountable ring around it. Between these elevated walls of land, a vast current of water flowed, encircling the country like a moat, hiding its interior from the outside world. Meanwhile, those on the outside could only see Wano's waterfalls cascading down from all sides. In the waters around the country was Onigashima, a smaller island shaped like a giant demon skull. The island, serving as Kaido's fortress, had been a hub of constant activity over the past month. The area was surrounded by over 200 ships, loaded with weapons, provisions, and soldiers, circulating incessantly, reinforcing defenses and intensifying preparations for the upcoming battle. Ships entered and exited Wano's ports directly to Onigashima, as Kaido ramped up resource collection. At the heart of Onigashima, Kaido himself appeared somewhat changed. Despite his arrogance, he had felt the power of Luffy in their battle at Marineford. Each punch from the straw hat in that state had made Kaido bleed and his body collapse under the impacts. It was a kind of power that prompted an unusual reaction from Kaido. He began to train. Surprising even his own subordinates, Kaido had sporadically dedicated moments over the past year to prepare himself, eager for a rematch against Luffy. That moment was drawing ever closer. In the country itself, the atmosphere was one of great apprehension. Even the most skeptical about the impending war began to feel the weight of Kaido's increasingly oppressive regime. Kazuki Hiyori was a woman who foresaw this war being won by Kaido and his allies, due to the prophecy her mother and even her father had spoken of, awaiting her brother's return less than a year from now. However, what she witnessed began to shake her beliefs. The people were suffering more than ever. Even Orochi was treated like a dog by Kaido, with the calamities themselves taking over the city. From what she heard, in the distant factories and villages, inhabitants had been forced to work harder than ever, preparing resources for the beast pirates and their war. Across all provinces, starving people begged for food, but not even soldiers were present anymore to hear their complaints or to steal from them. All resources and forces were being directed to Onigashima, with the beast pirates' troops organizing there. In the middle of the country, there was a small town where people resembled zombies, wandering back and forth. It had been over a month since all the food was taken from the town, and no one had brought any back, leaving them with nothing but scarcity and a polluted river from the factories to drink from. People were so thin that their bones showed through their skin. Others lay collapsed on the ground with vacant eyes, and even corpses that couldn't endure the conditions any longer lay in the streets. Yet no one had the strength to remove them, trying instead to conserve energy. People even fell into states of madness, considering cannibalism, but all who acted on this idea were killed by fellow citizens. The terror that had plagued Wano for 20 years only grew more intense. Nearby, there was a large hill with an abandoned castle, where the former family of Daimyo Kazuki, who ruled Wano before Kaido and Orochi's defeat, had resided. Everything seemed calm there, despite the atmosphere of despair blanketing the country. Suddenly, a distortion in space occurred as a door began to manifest. Sai opened it, stepping out with other people. The ship they had taken reached the skies above Wano, but after Luffy shrank the ship, Sai used his door powers to enter a separate space, allowing them to travel undetected to Wano. Despite the difficulty of detection, Luffy wanted to ensure Kaido remained unaware of their presence, so they could stir the country from within before the final battle. The samurai, Sai, Luffy, Lucy, Zoro, Kuina, Yamato, Chaochu, Nojiko, and Lami stepped out of the door, landing in the middle of the ruined place. As they all were proficient in observation haki, they quickly sensed the atmosphere for the first time. This, Yamato murmured. It was her first time in Wano, and instead of smiling with excitement, she looked on in shock. So much negative emotion in this place. Zoro muttered, frowning. How could they do this to these people? Nojiko murmured with a tone of worry. Oh. Even Chaochu whimpered. Lami, Reiju and Kuina remained silent, while only Sai and the samurai couldn't fully grasp what was happening. Why, everyone should have the right to eat. Lucy said, her voice carrying a rare tone of anger. Calm down. Kaido is managing this country worse than I imagined. Luffy commented, glancing out at the city. He hadn't anticipated Wano being in such a critical condition, wondering if he should have come sooner. The situation was truly macabre. I'm hungry. If only I could give my son some food. He doesn't cry anymore. That should comfort me, but it scares me. Has he given up? Is he even alive? My hands are covered in calluses, my lungs burn from the poisonous air. But if I stop, they'll kill me, like they did to that old man yesterday. Still, maybe that would be better than continuing to breathe in this hell. Mom and Dad promised they'd come back. But it's been so long. I'm so hungry I can't even remember what rice tasted like. Will I see them again? Have they forgotten me? I was supposed to protect the people, but now I'm just a broken man, powerless, watching everyone around me suffer. How did I let this happen? What's left of my honor? Maybe, nothing. There's nothing left to sell, no one has anything to buy. Orochi and Kaido took everything. My shop is empty, and so are my children. I just want to disappear. There's no future here. I've lived too long to see my country turn into this. I wish I'd died with Odin. At least I would have died with pride. Now all I do is wait for the end. Maybe in the next world, Wano will be free. I want to run, to escape this place. But where? There's no one to help me. My body doesn't respond the way it used to. It feels like hunger is eating me from the inside. I heard rumors. They say the samurai will return, waiting for the right moment. Maybe, just maybe, there's a chance. I need to believe, not for me, but for my children. Is there a place where we don't feel this? I thought this was how it was for everyone. Maybe this is just how the world is. But I wish, one day, I could eat until I'm full. How many more minutes can my body take? They say if we work hard, they'll give us food. Lies. It's all lies. We're cattle to Kaido. But one day, even if it's my last day, I'll do something. I'll break something. I'll fight. I don't cry anymore. There are no tears left to shed. Only hunger, hunger and emptiness. Maybe this is how the world ends, not with a scream, but with the silence of the starving. A series of thoughts began to be detected by everyone, hearing the darkest musings of the people in that place. Luffy. Lucy murmured, torn between anger and complicated emotions, mostly feeling pity. I know. We'll fix this situation before we deal with Kaido. Don't worry about it, Luffy said as he turned his back to the city and headed into the castle. The rest of the group followed him closely, trying to ignore the dark atmosphere. Luffy arrived at an area where, besides a part of the castle that was destroyed, there were markings with names on the ground. Are those graves? Zoro asked suspiciously. These are the graves of the heroes who fought nearly 20 years ago, the samurai explained as tears began streaming down his face. Kazuki Odin. Kazuki Toki. Kazuki Momonosuke. Kin Iman. Kanjuro. Reizo. Kikunajo. Kawamatsu. All the names were there, as everyone stood in silence, the only sound being the samurai sobbing. Not all of them are dead, some reappeared here months ago, Lucius said. There were names masking the return of some to the future, deceiving Orochi, despite him having spies among the samurai. Why is that? Kuina asked, puzzled. Because Odin's wife had a devil fruit that sent some of them into the future, but that doesn't matter now. The focus is on dealing with this country, Luffy said in a neutral tone. Even he couldn't summon any humor in the face of what he was feeling. So this is where Odin was killed. Yamato murmured. Her voice no longer carried the fantasy of wanting to be Odin as it once did. She had embraced her femininity, yet she gazed at the sight with somber eyes. After all, she carried a desire to protect Wano, driven by her Akuma no Mi. The Okuchi no Makami, a mythical white wolf said to be a protector of Japan in legends, was the spirit of her fruit. As it was said, Zoan fruits had their own will. Yamato's feelings toward Wano had never wavered. Luffy sighed, turning to face everyone. I've gathered you as a small group because we're going to begin our actions in this country subtly. That's why I called you here. Let's start our change. His gaze swept over each of them. We'll start with this city. From what I've noticed, there are no Kaido troops here, which gives us the freedom to act without being noticed. Even so, we must take down any beast pirates we encounter. Let's gather people who want to fight against Kaido, uniting all the samurai in this country. That's why we'll start by feeding the people of this city, purifying the water. We'll invade the factories, free all the prisoners, and spread this throughout the country without anyone realizing it. In the end, Kaido and Big Mom won't just face a fleet of nearly 18,000 pirates, but the rebellion of an entire nation, Luffy declared, his eyes fixed not just on his companions but on the city beyond. Yes. Lucy agreed. Wolf wolf. Chaochu barked. I'm looking forward to dealing with some of the people who allowed the country to end up like this, Zoro said. This is the land of my ancestors, so let's go, Kuina added. We'll finally free Wano. Yamato said with determination. Lami, Reiju, Nojiko, and Sai only nodded, while the samurai, still tearful, seemed grateful for their words. Luffy then smiled for the first time since stepping into this place. Alright then, let's go. It's time to begin, he said as they started to take action. Chapter 447 Wano 02. Third-person POV. New word. While everything seemed hopeless in Wano, the people didn't even notice the arrival of a massive ship emerging in the city. It appeared, flying from the sky without warning, landing at the city's entrance. A man, his head bowed, stared at the ground, thinking his life should end right there and then. He needed to escape this horrendous suffering, and death seemed like a merciful way out. He didn't even realize that the space around the entire city had turned bluish and appeared normal to him, his mind solely consumed by his anguish. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed. Something fell right in front of him, directly before his eyes, snapping him out of his state of apathy. His eyes widened at the sight before him, a bottle of water and a plate of hot food. He didn't even recognize the recipe, only noticing the meat and some carbohydrates. What? He stammered, unable to finish the sentence, too tired and exhausted to articulate words, his dry mouth barely cooperating. It seemed impossible. Yet, as he kept his eyes on that plate of food, he thought he might be witnessing some kind of mirage, or perhaps this was a passage ritual into another life. Maybe his death was finally here, and his prayers to the gods had been answered, allowing him to begin his transition with a full stomach. Could it be real? He whispered, his voice trembling. Or is it just a cruel trick of fate? The plate was so lavish that he hadn't seen anything like it in over 20 years. It was impossible not to remember a time when Wano wasn't under Orochi and Kaido's tyranny, when food was plentiful, the waters clean, and the animals healthy. Back then, there was no misery or destruction. Even with doubt gnawing at his mind, the man decided that, illusion or not, or even if it were his passage to death, it didn't matter. He didn't think twice. Smelling the food, he decided that if this was his last act, he would fight to savor it or die trying. With trembling hands, he picked up the plate of food, almost unable to believe the reality before him as he felt the plate was solid. Nervously, he brought it to his mouth. Ignoring the utensils, he opened his mouth directly, disregarding etiquette as he buried his face into the plate. All that mattered was tasting something real again. The moment the first morsel touched his tongue, he froze. The taste was real. It felt as if something deep inside him, long dead, was awakening. His eyes filled with tears, unsure where the moisture came from in his malnourished body. In the next moment, he devoured each bite without hesitation, savoring it as though it was the first meal of his life. Soon, he grabbed the water bottle, quickly opened it with trembling hands, and drank straight from the neck. The water coursed down his throat, cleansing the void that had settled there for so long. He felt every drop bringing life back to him. Tears continued streaming down his face as he ate and drank, forming a small puddle on the ground. Even though the tears wasted part of the water he had just consumed, it didn't matter, he couldn't hold them back any longer. In that moment, he felt something he hadn't in years: hope. "Thank you. Thank you," he said, crying. The word thank you began to echo from all directions at the same time, and he finally looked up. He no longer needed to save all his strength. Then, he saw everyone on the street in the same state as him, crying as they finished their plates like starving animals. It wasn't just that street. The entire city shared a collective sentiment as they wept and ate the mysterious dishes that had appeared before them, caring not for the delicious taste, but simply grateful to have something non-poisonous to consume. "This has to be a dream. This has to be a dream," the same man murmured, seeing children, women, and men everywhere holding their plates and bottles of water, tears in their eyes. Before he realized it, his plate disappeared like magic, making him open his eyes in bewilderment. But suddenly, another plate appeared in front of him, accompanied by a new liter of water, ready to be consumed. He hesitated for a moment but soon lunged forward faster this time. Grasping the utensils with newfound strength, he began eating again, this time more controlled, no longer like a starving animal. He could truly savor the taste of the food, as if he had never eaten anything better in his life. He devoured the food once more. And, like everyone else, as soon as they finished, a new plate magically appeared before them. It wasn't just one or two, a third plate emerged, and the entire city began eating until their stomachs could take no more. Meanwhile, at the city gates, the Sun Go lay docked. Aboard, the Straw Hats were working at full steam. In the ship's kitchen, Reiju was cooking at high speed, trying to feed the entire city. Luffy, his speed enhanced by the multiplication fruit, helped her. Nojiko and Lucy assisted in the preparation, enabling her to finish one plate after another, which would then disappear through Lami's room ability. The plates were instantly transported to the city, and the used dishes were returned to the kitchen, where Lucy cleaned them for Reiju to reuse. Even Lucy, who usually loved eating, refrained from taking any food this time. "I'd rather the citizens eat," she said with determination, despite her love for food. On the deck, the rest of the crew worked tirelessly as Lami continued to send plates across the city, using her powers to manipulate them within her room, which expanded to cover the entire area. With her proficiency in observation haki, she ensured that no one was left unfed. "We can't save those who've already been killed," Luffy murmured beside Lami, "but we can give hope to those still standing." The samurai with them, who had been observing everything, was incredulous. He had spent years with Shitenmaru's band of thieves, stealing food from Kaido and Orochi to survive as selfish individuals, without any hope of saving Wano. Yet, seeing people eating well after so many years was something he hadn't witnessed in over 20 years. An entire city being fed. "This is a miracle," he whispered, moved by the hope he saw. "I think that's enough now," said Lami, sensing that everyone had eaten at least 3 plates. Luffy nodded. Reiju, Nojiko, and Lucy stopped producing food in the kitchen, turning off the large pots and stoves as Lami retrieved all the utensils and plates, returning them to the kitchen sink to be cleaned. "This is really good," Yamato celebrated, laughing joyfully as he saw the city beginning to rise. Until then, the people had been lying on the ground, but now, they were standing up one by one. A significant amount of food had been consumed here, but Luffy had stored so much with him that feeding all of Wano was not difficult. He had more than enough resources to sustain the entire population, all stockpiled from his territories over the past year. "Great," said Luffy with a smile, also feeling the city's atmosphere shift completely. "Wolf! Wolf!" Chaochu barked happily, and the rest of the crew smiled silently. The people of the city, for the first time, began looking toward the ship docked at the city's entrance. Now that hunger and thirst were no longer issues, they finally noticed the straw hat flag proudly raised on the ship's sail. "What is that?" someone murmured. Even with tattered clothes and dirty bodies, a newfound strength resonated in their voices as they gazed at the ship, surprise and hope shining in their eyes. "I think it's time we introduce ourselves," Luffy remarked, stepping toward the prow. The onlookers stared, more and more gathering with curious eyes. After all, that food had to have come from somewhere, especially since they had been completely abandoned by the beast pirates, who had stripped the city of all its resources. "People of Wano," Luffy called, his voice echoing through the crowd. His crew joined him to watch. I am Monkey D. Luffy, a pirate, and the one who is here to defeat Kaido. The people began murmuring among themselves. That pirate who's going to fight Kaido, some whispered incredulously, recalling how the beast pirates had mentioned this as they left the city. Before they could continue, Luffy interrupted, raising his voice. Listen, everyone. We're leaving shortly, so I won't give a long explanation. We have an entire country to save. But I want you to understand that we are here to free Wano, and that's all you need to know. He paused, then continued. However, I demand that everyone who can still fight gather in the Udon region. I don't just want to free this country. I want its people to fight for it and join us. This is your best chance to face Kaido, your fears, and your doubts, and fight for a better Wano. The people's eyes widened as Luffy pressed on. And for those of you who think I'll be like Kaido, taking Wano for myself and ruling like a tyrant, hear this: I will make Wano my territory, but I will not treat it like Kaido did. There will be no abuses in my territory. He then pointed to the horizon and said, either way, I'm going. Remember, only those who truly want to fight for a better Wano and have the strength to do so, come to the coast and join me. We're heading to Onigashima. As soon as he finished speaking, the ship began to levitate, controlled by Lami's powers. The space around it seemed to distort as the ship left the city. The people stood stunned, watching the ship fly away, unable to say anything after hearing such words. But before Luffy disappeared, crates upon crates of supplies began falling from the ship, landing in front of the crowd. These were not just food supplies, swords and other weapons made of Wappa metal were among them, equipping the people to finally fight for their freedom. Quickly, Luffy and his crew moved on to other towns in the Kari region, repeating the same actions. People on the brink of death received plates of food that appeared like magic before them in their moments of despair. They began eating, regaining their strength. Many thought it was all a dream. Luffy didn't let anyone thank him or protest his actions. He simply delivered his speech and moved on to the next town, knowing he didn't have time for debates. His only goal was to provide the people with the means to survive and fight, giving those who chose to join him the opportunity to do so. He never forced anyone to fight, understanding the deep-seated fear Kaido had instilled in their hearts, a fear that had crushed their will. But he marked each person who came to him, knowing they would guide Wano's future. Meanwhile, in a forest, a little girl was walking slowly. Beside her, a small animal followed obediently. She was sad, and her stomach rumbled. It had been days since she last found any food. The fruit trees had been destroyed, and the water was poisoned. I wonder if the professor is okay, she murmured to herself as she made her way to her home in the middle of the forest. She knew that all the towns were in terrible shape, but hers seemed even worse. Perhaps due to her hunger, she didn't notice someone approaching. A voice called out from behind her. Hey, are you okay? She quickly looked up, startled. There stood a man wearing a straw hat, smiling at her. Who are you? She asked, her voice wary and trembling. The man kept his smile. I'm Monkey D. Luffy, Ace's brother. Do you remember him? The girl froze at the mention of Ace. But before she could respond, Luffy raised his hand, and a tray filled with plates of food appeared in his grasp. He placed the tray in front of her. How about eating with me? Luffy asked, his smile warm and gentle. Without a second thought, the girl lunged at the first plate, momentarily forgetting even Ace at the sight of food after so many days of hunger. As she ate quickly, Luffy watched her with satisfaction. Go ahead, eat as much as you want, Luffy said as the girl continued devouring the food in front of her. Chapter 448 Wano 03. Third-person POV. New word. We're almost there, big brother. The girl named Tama was leading the way ahead of Luffy as they approached a house in the middle of the forest, characteristic of Wano. She guided him excitedly to the door and pushed it open with a flourish. Tama, who's with you? A suspicious voice called from the other side of the door as it creaked open, revealing the presence of someone alongside the girl. Sensei, Sensei. I found a big brother. Look, I ate more than I ever have before. I'm so happy and full because of him. She exclaimed, pointing to her slightly rounded belly, a result of all the food Luffy had shared with her. With a radiant smile, she added, "And I brought food for you too, sensei. Big brother said I could share it with you." Tama held out a bag of food and offered it to the man. The man, seated inside the house and wearing a mask, looked at Tama with sharp eyes, clearly surprised by the situation, though a hint of suspicion lingered in his gaze. He raised his head and looked toward the door as another figure approached. Finally, the person came into view, and the man's eyes widened further behind his mask. "You?" he murmured, recognizing the newcomer immediately. After all, the face under the straw hat was well known from the newspapers he'd acquired through Kaido's men. "So, you're Tama's master?" "Kazuki Sukiyaki," Luffy said as he entered, glancing at the food Tama had brought and offering it to the teacher before him. "So, you know who I am?" the man asked, startled at being addressed by that name after so long, especially since he had kept it hidden. Still confused, he watched as his apprentice arranged the food before him, her gaze urging him to eat. "Of course, I know. You're Oden's father." "Anyway, it's a pleasure to meet you," Luffy replied with a smile. "So, you've come to Wano. Has the war with Kaido already begun?" the man asked, intrigued, as no sign of conflict had yet reached his ears. "Not yet. We're feeding the country first, staying hidden from Kaido and his men while he focuses all his forces on Onigashima. We entered Kuri with a small group. We're ending hunger in the towns before moving to other regions. I plan to transform all of Wano before we attack Kaido. After all, I wanted samurai and citizens to fight for their land too," Luffy explained calmly, stepping closer to the man. "I see," the man murmured, unable to say more as he processed what he had heard. He continued to observe Luffy carefully before speaking again. "But do you believe you can defeat Kaido? While I'm deeply grateful for what you're doing for this country, I remain skeptical. I have my doubts that you'll truly succeed." "Yeah, I get your doubts. After all, you're expecting your grandson, along with some of the red scabbards who've traveled through time thanks to Kazuki Toki's power, to appear and lead the charge here, aren't you?" Luffy said with a grin. "How do you know that?" the man asked, visibly shaken once again. It was knowledge known to only a select few in Wano. He had remained in the shadows, waiting for the country to finally change. Even his granddaughter was unaware of his existence. He believed himself a great coward for it, having even failed at seppuku, the samurai ritual of suicide. How I know doesn't matter now. What matters is that prophecy has changed. We're stronger than Kaido and Big Mom combined. Even they would need other allies, like another Yonko, to pose a real challenge to my crew. We already have enough powerful members that, even without me, they can defeat both Yonko, Luffy said confidently. "Anyway, I need to make a request." The man remained silent for a few seconds before turning to Luffy, his gaze narrowing slightly. "What do you want?" "I am an old man, a coward who spent all these years hiding, watching Wano descend to where it is now without the courage to do anything. I don't know how I can be of any use," he murmured in the end, letting the guilt and resentment he carried show. He had witnessed Wano's decline over the years but chose to remain in hiding after his son's death, even concealing his name. Tama stood nearby, looking surprised ever since Luffy addressed him as Kazuki Sukiyaki. "Sensei!" Tama exclaimed in astonishment, her eyes welling up with tears as she listened. She had known he disliked seeing others but was unaware of these thoughts of his. For now, she tried to ignore them, even though she could see that he was starving and still hadn't touched the food she had brought. "I need the swords," Luffy said, already knowing where Oden's weapons were. "I know that sword belongs to Oden and is a direct heirloom for his children, Momonosuke and Hiyori." He threw another bombshell at the man. "What? The swords?" By now, the man thought Luffy knew all the secrets of Wano and eventually accepted it all. "Even if you are helping Wano, I cannot give them to you," the man protested immediately, his voice firm. "I'm not asking to take them permanently, but the swords will be useful in the battle. You don't have to give them to me, just lend them, and I'll return them when it's all over. Then, you can pass them on to both your grandchildren," Luffy replied calmly. The man froze for a moment and finally sighed, resigned. After all, What more could he expect from someone known worldwide for challenging even emperors? Very well. I'll give you the swords, he said, reluctant in the end. So it's true? Big Brother is going to free Wano? Tama exclaimed, her voice filled with hope as her eyes shone brightly. I'll do my best. Wano will be free soon and will enter an era unlike any before, Luffy affirmed with a smile toward the girl. Answer me one thing first, what do you plan for Wano after Kaido? The man asked, still not touching the food. He looked at Luffy intently, formulating the most important question he had wanted to ask from the beginning. After all, he wasn't entirely sure what Luffy's goal for Wano was. It wasn't the first time someone had asked Luffy that. I've said this to every town I pass through, I'm not here to turn Wano into my territory in an abusive way. It will be under my flag, but I won't be like Kaido, Luffy began seriously. Quite the opposite. I won't continue any factories or experiments that pollute this place. I plan to purify the air, water, and land of Wano so that they become fertile again. I'll bring resources from my territories here so food can be distributed until Wano fully recovers. Luffy paused before continuing. I estimate that in 2 or 3 years, Wano will be self-sufficient again. After all, it's not enough just to defeat Kaido. The problem of hunger will persist as long as the land remains infertile with the lasting scars of the past 20 years. The man stayed silent, listening intently. Luffy seemed to know exactly what he was doing, something that surprised many. He had already discussed Wano's economy and soil recovery at length with Nojiko and Bippo, the crewmates most capable of having such conversations. Do you intend to bring kingdoms here? I saw a picture of your islands. Is that real? Can you transport them here? The man asked in surprise. Luffy nodded. Well, in any case, we'll discuss this more later. For now, my crew is arriving. Can you get the swords? He said. Outside, a massive shadow appeared in the sky, heading toward the location. A medium-sized ship with a lion figurehead landed in front of the house, crushing some of the forest's trees and vegetation. Tama ran outside, looking at it with admiration. Meanwhile, the man had brought out a box and opened it, revealing Odin's 2 swords, Aim no Habakiri and Enma, 2 of the 21 supreme blades. I'll talk to my crew. You should eat as well. After all, you still have a choice, fight or stay here, Luffy said, taking the swords and immediately showing interest in Enma. I doubt I can fight. My honor has been shattered by isolating myself for so long while such a disaster unfolded in my country, he murmured with regret. Maybe. But will you cower forever? Perhaps it's time to fight. Luffy said before leaving the man speechless as he looked at the food Tama had brought for him. Luffy! You just left the town and came straight here? Lucy exclaimed, stretching her arms as she approached where Luffy was stepping out of the house, near Tama, who watched curiously. Who is this, big brother? Tama asked, pointing at Lucy with a curious smile. This is also my sister. And besides, she's also Ace's sister, Luffy explained. Seeing the confused expression on Lucy's face, he continued, Ace helped her when he came to Wano. This is Tama, someone he knew. Really? How cute. Lucy commented, approaching Tama and pinching her cheeks. Hey, Captain. What swords are those? As soon as Zoro saw Luffy carrying the swords, he asked, clearly stunned upon realizing what they were. Ah, these? Take this one. It's yours temporarily, Luffy said, tossing the Shidame no Habakira directly to Zoro, who caught it in surprise. He didn't hand over Enma, as he himself was interested in the sword. Seriously, Captain? Zoro asked, examining the weapon with focused attention. Yes. This sword belonged to Odin. But be careful. It's known as the Sky Cutter. You'll need to train with it a bit while we're here, Luffy explained as Kuina approached, eyeing the sword curiously. Luffy wanted Enma for its unique trait of draining haki, so he planned to train with it himself rather than letting Zoro wield it as in the original timeline. Luffy, there's a grumpy old man inside, Yamato commented as she leaped from the ship, approaching and noting, with her haki, the internal conflict the man seemed to be experiencing. That's Odin's father. If you want to ask him something, go ahead. In any case, we'll stay here for a few more minutes before heading out. First, we need to find one of the red scabbards, who's ended up becoming a bandit, Luffy said, glancing directly at the samurai, who looked a bit embarrassed by the comment but couldn't deny it. After that, we'll leave this region and head to the factories before moving on to the capital, he concluded as the others listened attentively. Zoro went off to train with the new sword, feeling the challenge it posed. Meanwhile, the others gathered at Odin's father's house. At some point, Yamato struck up a conversation with Odin's father, asking animated questions without directly identifying herself as Kazuki Odin, as she had done before. Luffy discussed some of his plans while Lucy chatted with Tama, who played with Chaochu. Using her Akuma no Mi powers, Tama charmed a powerful Cerberus, quickly forming a friendship with the beast in Lucy. Lucy's relaxed demeanor made Tama laugh, and they bonded quickly. Reiju, for her part, prepared more meals for everyone, as no one had eaten yet. That sword? Sukiyaki exclaimed, surprised to see a sword at Kuina's waist alongside her official blade. Kuina explained that she had defeated the zombie of Shimatsuki Ryuma and earned the sword. Everyone in Wano knew of Shimatsuki Ryuma's desecrated grave, a legend in this land. Sukiyaki was even more astonished to learn that the dark blue-haired woman's name was Shimatsuki Kuina, a direct descendant. He could see how formidable she was with a sword. What are you doing? Lami, who hadn't been very involved, asked as she saw Luffy walking out holding Enma. I'm going to test this sword. Want to come with me? Luffy asked, planning to do the same as Zoro was doing in the forest. Lami shrugged and followed him. Chapter 449 Wano 04. Third-person POV. New word. In the region of Kuri, where the Straw Hats were currently located, the area boasted some truly unique landscapes due to the distinctive fauna and flora of Wano's greenest region, even though hunger was affecting everyone as it was in any other region. Among this forested landscape, a mountain stood out, over 1,000 meters tall. The scene appeared static, with the surviving wildlife going about its routine like any other day. Until, suddenly, a line cut straight across the base of the mountain with the sound of metal ringing out. For a few seconds, everything seemed normal, but then birds began flying not just from the mountain but from the entire forest as though fleeing something dangerous. And they were not wrong, as an explosive sound echoed, and the base of the mountain was sliced clean through, detaching it from the ground and sending it flying in one swift, clean cut. Hey, didn't you overdo it, Luffy? Lami muttered from the other side of the severed mountain, watching as Luffy, who had simply said he was testing the cut of the sword called Enma, examined the blade. She observed Luffy inspecting the sword, which shone with a dark purple light as it drew out his haki, something Lami could clearly sense. Luffy struggled to control the sword but laughed excitedly after seeing the result of his attack. It's so wild, he commented, his gaze fixed with intense curiosity on the blade. Finally, Luffy looked up to see the mountain, now fully severed, beginning to rise before starting its inevitable fall. The entire forest seemed startled, and even Sukiyaki emerged from his house, drawn by the explosive noise. The moment he saw what had happened, his mouth dropped open in shock. What is this? How is this possible? He exclaimed, unable to believe someone had cut an entire mountain to test a sword right outside his home. As the mountain continued its descent, another horizontal slash split it once more with another thunderous sound. Hey, Captain, be careful. We're training here. Zoro shouted from a distance, while Luffy simply shrugged and continued examining Enma, feeling his haki being drawn as he worked to master the sword and make it recognize him as its wielder. His gaze returned to Lami, who was watching him closely. Can you handle that falling mountain? Hold on. Luffy said, hoping Lami could manage the mountain before it destroyed the forest. Then, with a grin, he decided to make things easier for her, slicing the mountain into smaller parts. Zoro quickly joined in, and soon the mountain was reduced to small blocks. Lami sighed, then swiftly expanded an enormous room, organizing the falling blocks. They disappeared from the air and reappeared beside Sukiyaki's house, stacked neatly to form an even larger home. Amazing! Look at the size of that house. Tama murmured in awe. Luffy still held Enma, his arm extended, and the sword finally seemed to recognize him as its master. He now wielded both Enma and Roger's sword, two legendary weapons that had once clashed in battles of their own. "Alright, let's rest a bit before heading toward our objective," Luffy said. When they returned to Sukiyaki's house, Zoro was still practicing with his blade, using the sliced surface of Luffy's mountain as a platform to work on controlling the weapon. After a few hours, they bid farewell to Tama and Sukiyaki and departed, guided by a samurai toward a bandit-infested area of Kuri. Zoro stayed behind, with Luffy asking him to catch up or use the Vivre card to avoid getting lost. It didn't take long for them to find the place, an area more rugged and rocky. The Thousand Sunny landed right in front of the bandits' hideout, immediately drawing attention and throwing the group of bandits into chaos at the sight of a ship landing unannounced. "Boss! There's a ship here," one of the bandits yelled, alarmed, as the others quickly recognized Monkey D. Luffy's ship, now standing right in front of their base. At that moment, Ashura Doji emerged, looking shocked as he recognized the flag on the ship's sail. "So, they're here," he murmured. "So, you're Ashura Doji?" Luffy stepped to the edge of the ship before jumping down and landing in front of the group, his gaze fixed on the bandit leader. "Yes, that's me," the man replied, watching Luffy approach. "Good, it's a pleasure to meet you. I know you must be wondering what we're doing here in the middle of Wano while Kaido is preparing to kill us in Onigashima," Luffy said calmly. "Today, I'm here to deal with a few things, especially the hunger issue in Kuri," he explained. "What do you mean? Our people should be starving across all of Wano. How can you help with that?" Doji asked, a mix of skepticism and curiosity in his voice. Despite the lack of hostility from the other side, Doji knew he stood no chance against Luffy. He could feel through Haki that the captain of the Straw Hat Pirates was a monster unlike any other. Any attempt to fight him would result in his death, and there were others aboard the ship who were equally formidable. Hostility was not an option. "You haven't been to the towns yet, but we've been distributing food across the region. We've already managed to feed all the towns. After this, we're heading to another region, Udon, to liberate it and destroy the factories," Luffy explained. "Really?" the man murmured, still doubtful. Luffy pulled some small boxes from his pocket and tossed them forward. As they hit the ground, they expanded into enormous crates filled with food and weapons. "Here. This should help feed you and regain your strength," Luffy said, leaving all the samurai stunned by the sight of the overflowing crates. "Boss Doji." A samurai came running from the ship at that moment. "Lord Luffy speaks the truth. I saw it myself, he's been feeding all the towns. His food is real," he testified, vouching for Luffy's actions since their arrival. Doji nodded, starting to believe, and felt relief that his man, who had gone to Zou, had returned with the Straw Hats. It was a surprise. "Iniwarashi and Nekomamushi," he asked the samurai, recalling that he had sent someone to summon them for the impending battle. "They're on their way here." Along with the other minks, the samurai replied. Upon hearing this, Doji turned back to Luffy. "You said you wanted to talk," he murmured, ignoring the crates as his men began inspecting their contents. His focus was entirely on understanding Luffy's intentions. "Well, aren't you going to invite me in?" Luffy asked with a grin. With a sigh, Doji led Luffy into the hideout. The Straw Hat crew remained on the ship, as Luffy assured them he'd be quick. Meanwhile, the bandits eagerly distributed the food among themselves, rejoicing at finally having an abundance to eat after rationing their meager supplies. "You want us to fight, don't you?" Doji asked directly once they were inside and seated in a room. "Exactly. Didn't you send that man to Zou to see if they'd fight? I came here myself to answer your questions directly. What do I want for Wano in the post-Kaido era? I want Wano to be free. After all, I plan to." Luffy began to explain, sharing some of what he had already told Kazuki Sukiyaki. "So, gathering to fight Kaido?" Doji murmured, his eyes drifting to a sword hanging on the wall. He was silent for a moment before continuing. "I've been a bandit for a long time. I even stole food meant for the people. I don't think I'm worthy of this." "Is that it?" You're going to keep hiding like a coward? Luffy raised an eyebrow, staring at him intently. That's the same choice so many others have made. This is an opportunity to fight Kaido and the oppression he's imposed on you for years. I can fight him with or without you. But tell me this, will you forgive yourselves for not fighting for your country while an outsider does it alone? And besides, why did you send your samurai to Zou if you had no intention of fighting? Luffy said, his tone more serious than usual. Doji remained silent, clearly wrestling with his emotions. Luffy stood firm, waiting for an answer as the man struggled to find the right words. Anyway, think about it. I'm giving you weapons and food for all of Wano so you can fight and defend yourselves from any of Kaido's attacks while we take care of this country's issues before the war right under Kaido's nose, Luffy said. The man didn't know how to respond. I know about the prophecy, Luffy said as he stood up to leave. But it's wrong. When Odin's sun returns, Wano won't be what it is now. It'll be free, moving toward the light, recovering fully, and supported by many other kingdoms under my protection, Luffy declared with conviction. Alright, I'll fight. Doji's voice suddenly emerged, filled with determination. I'll fight by your side, Straw Hat, for a better Wano. I just hope you keep your word about everything you've said here, he added, and Luffy turned to him, finally smiling. Of course. Meet us in the Udon region. We'll launch an attack and destroy them for sure. Luffy said before turning to leave. Just answer me one more thing. Doji called out as Luffy was leaving. What will you do with the prisoners in the jails? Isn't it obvious? We'll get them all out, feed them, and whoever wants to fight, fights. I won't force anyone. But like I said, this is everyone's chance to do their part, Luffy replied. After that, he said no more and left, passing by the men who were organizing all the food they had received. He jumped back onto the ship. Thank you for everything, Straw Hat. I'll head to Udon soon and fight alongside the Red Scabbards. Please, find more of them, they are the best in Wano. We'll meet again soon. Doji said as he also stepped out and addressed Luffy. All right. Be ready. See you then. Luffy replied. With that, the ship began to lift, powered by Lami, and moved away. Meanwhile, in the towns, the impact of Luffy's gesture was unmistakable. Laughter and tears of joy mingled as people celebrated, eating to their heart's content and, for the first time in years, feeling hope. I'll go to Udon, shouted one citizen, grabbing a weapon from one of the crates Luffy had left. Did you hear? They're going to take down Kaido, and I'll fight. Even if I have to die in battle, another declared. I'll fight for Wano, echoed another. Me too. He saved my son. I'll repay that favor and join the fight, said a middle-aged man. As Luffy sailed away, he had no idea that an unshakable determination was beginning to spread throughout Kuri like wildfire. More and more people were ready to head to Udon, fight, and ensure victory against the oppressors who had subjugated Wano for over 20 years. Chapter 450 Wano 05. Third-person POV. New word. You're going to fight, Sensei? Tama couldn't help but ask curiously. It had been hours since Big Brother had left with his crew, and now it was already nighttime. Tama wanted to go with them, but Luffy had said there were still dangerous tasks ahead, and it might be unsafe for her. Even though she insisted she could be helpful with her Akuma no Mi, Luffy promised he would return soon. Now she looked at her sensei, waiting for his response, a little worried to see him standing still for hours as if lost in thought. He hesitated, pressing his lips together. I'd be ashamed to show myself again after hiding for so many years, but I can't keep hiding forever. Even if I'm labeled a coward by everyone and I'm not a great warrior, I will fight as well. He finished with a determined look. Sensei, then it's true that you're Odin's father. Tama murmured, not having discussed this with him since Big Brother had revealed it. Yes, you can call me a coward if you want, he murmured in a sad tone. No, Sensei is an important person, and I know you couldn't change the entire country alone. But if there's a chance to restore Wano as Big Brother said, you must help, and I will join too, she exclaimed. Tama. Sukiyaki murmured, cautious about her words, but he nodded in the end. It was time for him to fight or die for the country he had abandoned in recent years. At that moment, someone burst into the house, landing in front of the two. What's going on here? What is that construction, and where is the mountain that used to be in the middle of the forest? Shinobu approached quickly. Big sister Shinobu! Tama exclaimed, running to her. Shinobu looked at the little girl and then at Sukiyaki, relieved to see they were both okay. She let out a sigh of relief before kneeling to look at Tama carefully. Can you tell me what happened here, Tama? Shinobu asked. She wasn't supposed to know about Odin's father originally, but with the recent events around the world, it had been revealed through Tama. Sukiyaki introduced himself to Shinobu and mentioned that he had been in contact with some of the Red Scabbards. She had been in the region when strange things started happening, towns receiving food and weapons as if by magic, and people claiming a man wearing a straw hat had appeared, promising to fight Kaido. Upon hearing this, Shinobu rushed to one of Kuri's towns, found one of the Red Scabbards hiding in the area, and convinced him to finally meet Sukiyaki. On her way here, however, she and Jibuman noticed strange signs in the forest. They split up. Jibuman went to investigate the forest, where someone wielding a sword was causing destruction where a mountain should have been, while Shinobu came to check on Tama and Sukiyaki. Big sister Shinobu, I met big brother Luffy and big sister Lucy, and all their friends. Tama exclaimed excitedly. They came here, gave us food, and said they're going to fight Kaido. I forgot to ask, but we're going to join them. You will too, won't you, big sister? She asked, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. If it's true. Shinobu murmured, glancing at Sukiyaki, who nodded. Yes, sit down. I'll tell you the details, he said. All right. And what about the person in the forest? Jibuman went to investigate, Shinobu asked. No need to worry about that. He's a friend of Big Brother Luffy, Tama replied, trying to ease her concerns. But at that moment, someone appeared at the door. Excuse me, Zoro said, entering while dragging an unconscious body. He threw the body forward with a sharp motion. This lunatic attacked me out of nowhere and cut my Vivre card. Can you tell me where the region Luffy went to is? I've already mastered the sword, Zoro declared confidently. He had stayed behind to master his sword, but hours had passed since Luffy left. That was enough time for him to master Ain no Habakiri. Sukiyaki, Tama, and Shinobu stared in shock as they saw Jibuman lying on the ground, blood dripping, completely defeated in an instant upon encountering Zoro. While this unfolded and Zoro began to leave, heading in the direction they had pointed out without knowing exactly where he would end up, Luffy's ship was swiftly departing from Kuri through the sky. Luffy studied a map he had received from Sukiyaki, carefully analyzing the regions of Wano. Here in Udon, there are hardly any villages, but we'll deal with the prisons first and handle the common people afterward. After all, it's the closest area to Onigashima, and I want to put the prisoners to watch over the place and report to Kaido that everything is running smoothly, Luffy said, looking at the sea during the night as they sailed through the sky. Onigashima glowed along with the hundreds of ships surrounding the island. They had the advantage of being far away while still able to see Onigashima lit up, though they were too distant for anyone there to notice them flying. Luffy, the one in charge of this region, is Queen. At least, that's what I know about Kaido's forces, Yamato informed, sharing the information she had since leaving Wano with Luffy. I doubt he's here. When they found out we were coming, they definitely started preparations in Onigashima. Kaido must have kept him there until the war, as he doesn't even care about Wano anymore, based on what we've noticed, Luffy replied. I see. Yamato murmured, and the ship continued toward the prison as the day began to break. Meanwhile, at Udon prison, the prisoners worked relentlessly, even in the early hours of the morning, unable to rest. Among them were important figures like Kawamatsu and Hyogoro, both playing crucial roles in the resistance against Kaido and Orochi but having spent years as prisoners in the factories. Kawamatsu, one of the Red Scabbards, had been captured years ago after being forced to part ways with Hiyori, Odin's daughter. Since then, he had worked in the prison, holding on to the hope that Momonosuke's return might one day free Wano. However, things were changing at the prison. The sudden absence of Queen, who had left the prison's administration weeks earlier, raised suspicions. Since then, the guards had started withdrawing, leaving fewer and fewer behind. This confused the prisoners, but the workload only increased, driving many to their limits. They were forced to produce even more, leading many to collapse, while the beast pirates were cruel enough to execute those who succumbed to exhaustion. No one knew what was happening. The guards refused to explain anything. Finally, with the arrival of a new prisoner, some clarity began to emerge. The rumor was that a powerful pirate group, strong enough to make Kaido cautious, had declared war against Kaido and one of his allies. This group was currently heading to Wano, and a war was about to erupt. The prisoners didn't know what to make of this. Kawamatsu, in particular, pondered the significance of these developments. He still held on to the hope that the prophecy of Momonosuke's return would come true, but doubts began creeping into his mind. After all, it was just 4 of them: Kinemon, Reizo, Kanjuro, and Momonosuke. Could they truly change the situation on their own? Maybe. Kawamatsu murmured to himself, deep in thought. If this pirate group allies with us, things could be different. Maybe this isn't the moment to defeat Kaido, but if we're strong enough to fight together, we might be able to change the future alongside Momonosuke and the others. That was his thought. Hey, what are you doing? Get back to work, a voice snapped beside him, breaking his reverie as one of the prison guards glared at him with a sour expression. Kawamatsu nodded silently and resumed working. It was at that moment that the Sunigo finally appeared in the sky above the prison, catching everyone's attention from the deck below. These guys, they're poisoning the country with this factory? Reiju murmured, disgust evident in her voice. It's truly cruel. Nojiko commented as well, while everyone else fell silent. Luffy observed the scene and climbed onto the edge of the ship. I'll go first and take care of everything, Luffy said before leaping, increasing his weight with the Moa Moa no Mi to fall like a cannonball. No one had noticed the shadow in the sky yet, until Hyogoro himself looked up, intrigued by the sight of a ship hovering over the factories, motionless in the air, encircled by a blue glow. What is that? He murmured, confused. Suddenly, something dropped from the ship at an incredible speed, too fast for anyone to track. The object struck the ground in the center of the prison, creating a massive explosion. Everyone froze immediately, staring in shock. Even the guards quickly mobilized, readying their weapons. What's going on? Is this an enemy attack? One of the few guards shouted, alarmed. Look up. There's something in the sky, another pointed. Could it be the Straw Hats? A third murmured, frowning nervously, hoping they were wrong and wouldn't have to deal with such a formidable group. Well, looks like you hit the nail on the head, a voice echoed from within the smoke of the explosion on the ground. The next moment, an invisible shockwave rippled out from the center, stunning everyone. The guards began collapsing one by one, unable to withstand the overwhelming haki dominating the area. Even the strongest prisoners winced, feeling the suffocating weight of the kingly presence, though it wasn't directly aimed at them. Well, looks like it's over, said a figure stepping out of the smoke. His hat sat firmly on his head, his iconic outfit shirtless, wearing only pants and boots, with a black admiral's cape fluttering in the wind, bearing the Jolly Roger emblazoned on the back. His entirely black attire stood out as he revealed himself to everyone. No one could utter a word, paralyzed by the sheer suddenness of the events unfolding before them. Straw Hat, a voice finally managed to exclaim in frustration. Well, I'm here to set you all free. But I didn't expect to find someone like you here, Luffy said, looking with interest at Hyogoro, a renowned Ryo practitioner. He also noticed Kawamatsu, who stared at him wide-eyed with a curious expression. Anyway, you're all lucky I came. After all, I'm here to take over this prison and set you all free. Luffy declared with a grin. Meanwhile, the ship began descending, landing in the middle of the prison, which was already entirely subdued. Not a single person remained standing after the overwhelming display of Luffy's haki. Luffy then turned to Kid, who stood beside Killer. It seemed that Kid had also come here, though in this timeline, he hadn't yet lost his arm to Shanks. Chapter 451 Wano 06. Third-person POV. New word. Tell me, how did you end up here? I saw you were in the middle of the sea not long ago. Luffy said, looking at the member of the worst generation's supernova group. You were spying on me, then? Kid said with disgust. Of course. Luffy didn't deny it. After all, I need to stay updated on the sea. I have many spies monitoring the movements of people who interest me. But you still haven't answered my question. Are you in Wano because of my war against Kaido? He asked. I'm not answering your question. Kid snapped while Killer remained silent beside his captain, a sign that he hadn't eaten a smile. I see. That was all Luffy needed to hear to know the answer. Well, in any case, you're in luck, because I'm here to free you. Luffy said. Wait. An elderly man called out, and Luffy immediately recognized him as the old man known as Hyogoro. Are you Monkey D, Luffy? He asked cautiously. Luffy listened, sensing the man's curiosity. Yes. It was obvious. But that old man wanted to ask anyway. Meanwhile, Luffy shifted his gaze to the large man who looked almost like a frog and was watching curiously. It's good to meet another of the 9 red scabbards, Luffy said. Yes, that's me, he replied. Well, in any case, I'll free everyone. We can talk later. Lami, can you act? Luffy turned toward the ship, where Lami on the deck nodded, creating her room. She quickly detected all the keys and teleported them to all the prisoners. Good, you can all be freed now. Even you, Caribou. Luffy teased as a man appeared from hiding, looking at him fearfully. This man was weak and clumsy but inherently untrustworthy as the opportunist he was. In the end, the prisoners began grabbing the keys and unlocking their shackles. Finally, they started to free themselves. Are you going to fight Kaido? One of the common residents approached Luffy. Of course. I'm going to take down Kaido. That's why I'm inviting all of you to join us as I move through the regions of Wano, he said. And how could we be useful? We're not as strong as one of the red scabbards. The prisoner muttered. I'm not saying I'm forcing you to fight, but you've been standing still for so long, and now you have the chance to finally fight. I've talked to many of you along the way here, and I know some of you will come, even if you're not very strong. Still, you want to fight for this country. That's why I'm extending this invitation. Even if you're not the most powerful to face Kaido, at least do your part, Luffy said, and the place fell silent. He then turned to Kawamatsu. Will you fight? Luffy asked. I've spoken to some Inuarashi, Nekomamushi, and Doji, they'll join the fight. I don't know about the other scabbards, but I don't think they'll stand by. The question is, will you come along? Kawamatsu seemed hesitant. Maybe this is a chance to fight, Hyogoro said with a serious look at the green-hatted man. He spoke before turning back to Luffy. So, are we really going to take down Kaido? He asked, wanting to see Luffy's determination. If he knew what Luffy was thinking, he might not have asked, as Luffy didn't even see Kaido as a challenge anymore. Obviously, he will be taken down, but I'd like to see the people of Wano fighting as well, Luffy said, and Hyogoro nodded. And what do you plan to do with Udon? Surely, someone will notice something is wrong here since you said you plan to move to other regions of Wano, the man asked again. That's why I need your help. I want you to pose as the Beast Pirates, make any necessary calls. I'll leave a powerful member of my crew here. If anyone comes, as long as it's not a calamity, they can handle it easily, Luffy said and looked toward the ship. Chaochu, come here. Luffy called, and everyone waited to see someone powerful. Suddenly, a furry dog jumped off the ship, landed on the ground, and began walking toward them. The dog? The samurai were somewhat stunned by this. After all, since Wano was a closed-off country, no one had any news about the Straw Hat crew or their journey. So, Chaochu was an unknown figure. The dog is dangerous, Kawamatsu murmured, sensing through his haki that this was no ordinary dog. Even he couldn't defeat that dog. Well, anyway, here. Luffy said as he pulled small boxes from his pocket and enlarged them. Inside these boxes are food and weapons for you, he said. Now, we'd better get going. Chaochu, you stay with them while we go take down some of Kaido's men in the region, as there must be a few around. We'll grab all the den mushi here before returning to give them to you, Luffy said, pausing. In the meantime, we'll be feeding the villages in the region. I want you to intercept any messages about what's happening here and relay to them that everything is normal with the prison's communicators, Luffy said, and they nodded. In the end, we'll also take down the factories. I want you to stop all activities there since they won't be used anymore. And I also want you to place this device in every factory, Luffy said as he started handing out a crate full of Dynastones, which he had taken from Zephyr. They nodded as Luffy returned to the ship with the other members, except for Chaochu, who stayed behind. We'll see you soon. Remember, those who want to fight, wait for us. We'll leave this region and head to Onigashima, Luffy said before taking off with Lami's power. And so, he began moving through each of the local villages. There were only a few in the region, but there were some. He quickly began feeding the people with food prepared by Reiju. When Kaido's men appeared, he simply made them disappear and took their communication devices. He did this throughout the region, being careful not to leave anyone among the citizens who might be a spy and pass information to the enemy. They returned to the prison, tossing in only the collected den mushi. Once done, they headed to another region, moving directly east into Hakamai. The region had a yellowish hue, but its red-orange weapons made it distinct. There were large port cities there. And so, the process began, supplying the cities and recruiting more villages with his speech. Messages continued to be passed, while citizens, moved by having food to eat, nodded to Luffy's request. The next area was Ringo, the snowy region. While Luffy and his crew supplied the cities in the region, Luffy asked Lami to head toward the cemetery. They landed at the site where Wano's greatest samurai were buried. Kuwena, come with me. Luffy requested as they arrived, with the ship staying over 300 meters above the ground. Kuwena nodded silently, following Luffy as they descended and landed amidst the snow-covered graves, all bearing inscriptions of who was buried there. What are we doing here? Lami asked. Isn't it obvious? Something was stolen a long time ago, and now it's time to return it, Luffy replied. The body of... She murmured as she saw Luffy pull a preserved body from his pocket, encased in a coffin. Yes. Shimatsuki Ryuma, your ancestor, Luffy commented. I see. He was violated by Moria. She murmured, gripping the sword she carried. But what about the sword? She asked. The sword now belongs to you. No one can take it, after all. You're a direct descendant, or so I believe. It's better to have that sword in competent hands than sitting as a museum piece, Luffy said as he carried the preserved body to Ryuma's tomb. Shimatsuki Ryuma was the famous dragon slayer. He needed to put him back in his tomb, something Luffy had planned ever since he retrieved him from Moria. Luffy looked at her, sensing someone approaching. It seems we have company, he murmured as a large man, laden with weapons, approached angrily, seeing them standing in the middle of the graves. How dare you come here, the man shouted. Don't mind the hostility, Luffy said to Kuina. It's good that you're here. I came to return the body of Shimatsuki Ryuma, which was stolen over 10 years ago. The man was stunned when he saw the body in Luffy's hands. How did you get that? Were you the one who stole it? The man accused. Don't be stupid. Moria was the one who stole it, he turned it into a zombie. But that doesn't matter now. Anyway, I'm here to return the body, but not the sword, Luffy replied. But the sword also belongs to Wano, the man exclaimed immediately. Shusui is a national treasure. You see, standing beside me is Shimatsuki Kuina, the direct descendant of Shimatsuki Ryuma. The sword belongs to her by right. She defeated Ryuma's ghost, and he himself gave it to her. Even if you don't believe it, that's what happened, Luffy explained. I don't believe that, the man shouted, glancing at Shusui beside another fine sword, before turning his attention to the ones Luffy carried at his waist. Enma and Ace. Enma, he murmured, staring at the other sword, also a treasure of Wano. You have Enma. Return it, he exclaimed. Luffy, I don't think the sword should belong to me, Kuina murmured, feeling a little guilty about having a sword from this country, even if it belonged to her by some right. Luffy raised an eyebrow at her. Well, I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong, but I believe that sword belongs to you now. If you want to return it to Wano, that's your own choice, Luffy said as the large man charged forward to attack him, drawing his sword to defeat him. Luffy didn't move, quickly unleashing his haki, which caused the man to immediately lose consciousness. He transformed into smoke, and a fox collapsed on the ground in his place, unconscious. Maybe the other samurai can talk to him, Luffy said, leaving the corpse and even the fox aside. Let's go back to the ship. We'll resolve what to do with Shusui later, or rather, you'll decide what to do, Luffy said, and Kuina simply nodded. Knowing the fox would know what to do with Ryuma's body, he and Kuina began leaping through the air, heading back to the ship. It didn't take long for the ship to start moving again, heading to the next territory in Wano. Chapter 452 Wano 07. Third-person POV. New word. Then, the choice is yours. We'll be waiting for all the red scabbards willing to fight for Wano and Udon. I hope to see you there too, Luffy said to the female figure. Despite being a man, she acted and dressed like a woman. She was also one of the 9 red scabbards, Kikunajo. This samurai was in Kaibe while they passed through one of the towns, and as soon as Luffy saw her, he approached her. She seemed hesitant. Luffy shrugged. Anyway, we have more towns to handle, so I can't stay long to chat. Whatever your decision, we're heading to Onigashima with all our forces. The question is, are you going to let this opportunity pass and regret it? Luffy asked. He had to ask because, to be honest, it wouldn't be easy for someone who wanted so badly to seek justice for Oden to not fight because they believed the Straw Hats couldn't win. In the end, things might not turn out as she thought, with news of their victory over Kaido. She would regret it for the rest of her life if she didn't fight against Kaido too. As he returned to the ship, leaving the samurai behind, he saw his sister being restrained by Kuina and Yamato in the middle of the deck. As soon as Lucy saw Luffy, she looked at him with tears in her eyes. How can they be so cruel? Lucy murmured. I know how you feel, sister. Luffy said with a serious expression. Luffy, this isn't a life. People can't be treated like this. Everyone should have the right to eat, she said. It wasn't the first time she felt this way, but Kaibe had made the worst of Wano's situation clear. Despite hunger being widespread across the country and people living in precarious conditions, there was also a lack of food even before Kaido left the country in such a state in recent weeks. And Kaibe was extremely poor, with people living at a level far below what could be seen anywhere else in Wano. Despite the lack of food, Wano didn't require many natural resources to provide decent housing, but Kaibe was already in such a bad situation that they didn't even have that. It was so dire that they hadn't been as affected by the food shortage simply because they were used to living that way for a long time. Of course, the region wasn't populous due to the poor quality of life. Many died daily, but they were also the ones who complained the least about the food shortage, which was quite sad, and Lucy saw the look of resignation in the eyes of these people. That's why she was so indignant, furious at everything she had seen in Wano so far. Extremely agitated, Lucy wanted justice, unable to agree with such conditions. You're going to take Kaido down then, Luffy, she asked, looking at him, almost demanding it. Yes, Luffy answered. You'd better, or I'll do it myself. That bastard is going down. How can he leave the country like this, she commented angrily. All right. I understand your anger, Lucy, but first, let's focus on saving these people. We'll deal with Kaido when the time is right, Luffy said to his sister, pausing before continuing. Now, let's feed the rest of the towns and head to the last point in Wano, Luffy said with a serious look, and Lucy nodded at his words. They continued feeding all the towns in Kaibe. The people had never seen so much food in their lives, and they felt the same as in previous regions, perhaps even more, as they cried and ate. Later, Luffy gave a speech in each town and delivered more resources before heading to the next stop. Of course, Luffy didn't expect most people from this region to come and fight, as it was the most affected by years of suffering, and they were probably afraid of losing the battle and falling even further than they already were. Even so, he didn't deny them help, providing all the resources he could. Well, we've already talked to some of the red scabbards. Although I still believe there are 2 of them in Kuri, we've also dealt with all the regions except for the capital. So, it's time to. Won't the capital report us for carrying out this operation, Luffy? Nojiko asked, and Luffy nodded. That's true. However, we'll need to take down all of Orochi's Den Mushi before he warns Kaido. That's why I want Lamy to act as soon as we arrive and gather all the communication devices in the city, Luffy said, as Lamy was the best option since Enel couldn't perform his electromagnetic disruptions. Understood, she replied calmly, and they set off for the flower capital. The capital looked as usual, not very affected by the famine ravaging the rest of the country, as Orochi always wanted his city to be clean and ensured the people there had some decency. The place was relatively clean, but most of the food went to Orochi's soldiers, who used hunger to recruit followers and subordinates. Even though the city was better supplied with food, the people were still unhappy. They saw themselves as slaves there. Some, despite their deep sorrow, laughed at anything. After all, they had been affected by faulty smiles distributed by Orochi in the city, stripping them of the ability to express their true emotions and turning their lives into a living hell. In one part of the capital was Hiyori, with her blue hair and renowned beauty, the most stunning woman in Wano. She was disguised as a woman named Kamurasaki, an Oiran of the highest rank, a Taiyu known for her beauty and talent with music, enchanting everyone, even Orochi himself. Orochi desired her, but she refused to engage in prostitution. Despite this, she had to use her beauty to manipulate him while harboring a deep hatred, waiting for the day he would be killed. She was alone in her room when Denjiro appeared, having returned from gathering information. Tell me, Denjiro, how are things in Wano? Any signs of improvement? Hiyori asked, concerned, knowing that things hadn't been going well in recent weeks. Sorry, princess, but the situation is worse than before. From what I've learned, people are dying of hunger, Denjiro murmured, sharing the information he had gathered from his contacts before Luffy's arrival. Luffy had only been in Wano for 2 days, so any news from beyond his immediate efforts was outdated. I see. How much worse can Wano get before my brother and the others arrive? Hiyori murmured, recalling how she cried as a child after her parents' deaths and worried about her brother's future. We will endure, princess. Wano will survive until we see better days. Don't worry. Everything will change, and Wano will be free, Denjiro assured her. I hope so. I hope this war between these pirates ends soon and the people no longer have to suffer. Hiyori wished aloud. Meanwhile, in the main castle, Orochi was drinking but not celebrating as he usually did. He was furious. Kaido, you bastard, he shouted, throwing his cup against the wall. The women he had summoned screamed in fear and fled. He had hired them to dance and sing for him, hoping to improve his mood. However, things weren't going well. Orochi felt betrayed. Kaido had placed a knife to his throat, forcing him to obey orders, moving resources and preparing men throughout Wano for specific tasks. He couldn't refuse since Kaido held a calamity in reserve, threatening to kill him. That scoundrel! How dare he do this to me? Orochi murmured, now alone in the room. But he could do nothing but complain. After all, his strength was far below Kaido's, and attempting to defy him was certain death. I swear, when I get the chance, I'll make him regret it. Orochi murmured, hoping that day would come soon. But it never would for him, as that would be the day he died. In the next moment, suddenly, the entire space in the capital turned blue, with no one knowing where it came from. The atmosphere had completely changed. And then, with a movement of a feminine finger, all the Den Mushi began to disappear, with almost no one noticing. They were teleported to the deck of the ship, stacked one on top of the other. Done, Luffy. I've finished, Lamy said. Very well. Now I can act. Luffy said with a wild grin. He walked to the edge of the ship, looking down at the capital below the ship. His grin widened even further as he saw Orochi alone. At least there would be no unnecessary casualties. Let's begin then, he said, his gaze fixed directly on Orochi in the castle. Pointing his hand in that direction, a ball of purple flames began to form. He simply fired it without warning, like a cannon. The city began to notice the glow coming from the sky, heading toward the city. Before anyone could react, the ball exploded over the castle, creating a massive blast. Boom! Quickly, everyone looked toward it, shocked by the strength of the impact. What is that? What's happening there? The citizens quickly pointed, frightened, seeing the amethyst flames burning a section of the castle. Even Hiyori, in one of the grand houses of the city, quickly ducked by the window, looking in shock at what she was witnessing as Orochi's castle burned. She wondered what it was. The ship began to descend at this moment, and the people finally saw it coming from the sky. What is that ship? I don't recognize it. We know who they are, they're the Straw Hats. Most of the people asked questions, pointing at the flag. However, a few immediately recognized it, having read about them in the leaders' newspapers. What does that mean? That? Hiyori murmured, shocked by the enemy pirate of Kaido being here in the capital. But it was Denjiro who responded. Yes, it's the Straw Hats, Denjiro murmured with a serious expression, watching the ship land in front of the burning castle. Luffy stepped off the ship, walking forward. Come on, Orochi, I know you're still alive. You've only lost one of your lives after all, Luffy said calmly, knowing that the attack had caught Orochi off guard. He hadn't even been able to react, as the entire floor he was on was destroyed. But that wasn't enough to kill him due to his devil fruit. Who are you, you bastard? Orochi's voice emerged, hysterical, as he reappeared, jumping from the castle and landing on the ground. Part of his body was burned, and he glared at Luffy with hatred. Look at you, the current daimyo of Wano. I must say, you look more like a pig than a daimyo, Luffy said calmly, his gaze filled with disdain for the repugnant being. He also harbored a personal grudge due to Orochi's betrayal of Oden's trust when Oden had once helped him. Chapter 453, Wano 08. Third-person POV. New word. Luffy had his full attention on the man who was larger than normal, staring at him with hatred as he made his comment. Who are you calling a pig? Orochi immediately exclaimed as palace guards quickly appeared to stand between him and Luffy. You idiot. You might be weak, but you're not deaf. Luffy spared no insults for Orochi. I am Orochi, the daimyo of Wano. You have no right to insult me here, and I'll kill you for this, he shouted. My lord. One of Orochi's subordinates hesitated, seeing Luffy calmly standing there before them. Before he could say anything, Luffy decided to announce who he was. After all, Orochi seemed foolish enough not to recognize him, though he should have seen a newspaper or heard of him by now. I am Monkey D. Luffy. I'm here to kill you, and I hope you know that. Luffy spoke calmly, while Orochi's eyes widened in surprised rage. You're the one Kaido wants to fight? Quick, call Kaido. Orochi yelled, now wearing the fearful expression people often had when they saw Luffy. He was recognized as a Yonko in most of the world now, and such reactions were common. My lord. The Den Mushi are gone. A man rushed out of the castle, reporting with concern and noticing their absence. Little did they know there were no more Den Mushi left in the entire city. You think you're going to report our position to Kaido, don't you? Luffy mocked, and in the next moment, he prepared to strike. He slowly drew Enma from its sheath, ready to honor Oden. It was this bastard who helped the old man kill Oden. A voice came from the ship as Luffy unsheathed the sword completely. Yamato landed beside Luffy, casting a serious look at Orochi. Do you want to handle him? Luffy asked, looking at Yamato, who was already prepared to kill him 7 more times in quick succession. Please, let me finish him off. Yamato pleaded. After all, she had always aimed to eliminate Oden's enemies. Luffy nodded, but he didn't sheath Enma. You're sending a woman to deal with me? Orochi exclaimed angrily as his subordinate stood, unsure of what to do. In the next instant, a blur passed through them, and no one reacted in time before a burst of blood erupted. Yamato had smashed Orochi's head in before he could even react, using a single blow from her kanabo. She looked at his lifeless body on the ground for a moment as silence fell over the entire area. Then Yamato turned to Luffy. "Hey, you said he has a devil fruit that gives him multiple lives, right?" Yamato asked. "He has 8 lives in total. I killed him once, and now you've killed him a second time. He'll have to die 6 more times before it's permanent," Luffy informed her. "I see." Yamato nodded, waiting while Orochi's decapitated body remained on the ground. Orochi's subordinates were paralyzed with fear, but Luffy decided to deal with them quickly. He simply swung Enma in the air, and in the next moment, all of Orochi's bodyguards, supposedly the strongest among his men, were dead, their heads severed. After that, Luffy finally sheathed Enma and turned back to Yamato, who was still watching Orochi's lifeless, headless body on the ground. "I doubt he'll come back again. Hit his heart one more time and then burn the body. That way, he'll start losing the remaining lives," Luffy instructed, knowing Orochi wouldn't regenerate until the right moment. Yamato calmly lifted her kanabo and slammed it into the ground, causing everything to explode along with Orochi's body. It seemed Luffy's theory was correct, as Orochi reappeared from the smoke, regenerated, now losing his 3rd life. Frustrated, he turned back with anger and screamed hysterically, You! Damn you!" as he gained some distance. Before Yamato could strike again, Orochi began sprouting 4 additional heads around his original one, which also expanded, transforming him into a monstrous beast. Luffy looked at him as if he were an idiot. This guy doesn't even know how to use his Akuma no Mi properly. He can only transform into the hybrid form. Luffy thought. To him, the true power of a mythical Zoan like the Hibi Hibi no Mi model, Yamata no Orochi, was immense, on par with Kaido's. But Orochi was small and weak, relying only on bite attacks and failing to develop his fruit. It was ridiculous for someone with such a powerful fruit, one of the mythical Zoans. Yamato observed the scene and prepared to fight. The next moment, she charged forward before Orochi could react and destroyed one of his heads. Orochi barely had time to respond as Yamato, with her Yonko-level strength, began destroying head after head. In just a few moments, 3 more heads were obliterated, leaving only 1 remaining. "No! I can't die here!" Orochi murmured in terror, panicking. He tried to escape, knowing that his secrets were now uncovered. But the moment he took his first step, Yamato was already beside him. Lightning surged around her weapon. "Raime hack!" Yamato shouted as she unleashed the attack, one of her most powerful techniques, her weapon glowing with thunder. Orochi turned into nothing but a balloon of blood, exploding as his body fell apart. His face was hurled toward the castle, which began to crack and collapse, flames spreading throughout the structure. By this point, the entire city was watching Orochi's castle crumble further into flames. More people gathered cautiously near the ship positioned in front of the castle, which was being destroyed. Others fled the castle, trying to escape the falling debris. "Luffy, wasn't that a bit cruel?" Lucy approached him, glancing at the pile of bodies he had decapitated. "They don't deserve mercy, Lucy. They've been destroying this country for years, thriving on the suffering of others." "I have no intention of showing them compassion," Luffy replied. Luffy never killed defenseless prisoners, preferring to release them and hand them a sword rather than kill someone in chains. However, cases like Orochi and the Celestial Dragons were exceptions. Someone like them, chained or not, deserved a brutal death, and Luffy had no regrets. Among the people approaching was Hiyori, Odin's daughter. She observed the scene in shock, watching Orochi in his monstrous form being defeated. Heads exploded one after another as Yamato moved so quickly it was almost impossible to follow, culminating in the final head of the now fully dead Orochi smashing against the castle. "Orochi. He's been killed?" Hiyori murmured, barely able to believe what she was seeing. "Yes, he's dead," Denjiro replied quietly, equally surprised. Hiyori and Denjiro continued moving closer to get a better look at Luffy. "What should we do now?" "The whole city is coming this way," Kuina, aboard the ship, commented. "I see. Let them come," Luffy replied before amplifying his voice to reach the entire city. "Attention, everyone in the Flower Capital. Your former daimyo is dead as of this moment. The city is now under the command of the Straw Hat Pirates. I invite everyone to gather in front of the castle to hear what we have to say and what our plans are for Wano, Luffy announced. His voice was clear, loud, and calm, amplified by the power of his Akuma no Mi. He knew it would terrify many people, but they would still come to hear him and learn what their lives would look like moving forward. Quickly, people turned their eyes toward Luffy, stunned, while others began approaching the castle cautiously, unable to believe what they were hearing. Lami, I want you to sweep the entire capital and seize any Den Den Mushi and detain any of Kaido's or Orochi's henchmen. We can't let them inform Kaido too soon, Luffy ordered as she nodded. Kuina, Nojiko, and Lucy disembarked from the ship, while only Reiju and Lami remained aboard. They would work together as the ship began to lift off, leaving behind the rest of the crew except for Zoro, who was presumably in Kuri, and Chaochu, who stayed in Udon. Now, all the people had gathered in front of the destroyed castle as the flames continued to consume it. Well, to begin with, my name is Monkey D. Luffy, Admiral of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, and I am a Yonko of the sea, just like Kaido. We are about to fight each other soon. That's why I'm taking the liberty of coming to Wano to clean up all the harm he has done over the past years, while also seeing who is willing to fight for Wano and inviting them to join us, Luffy said. The people looked at him, unsure of what to say. To start, I'm working on healing this country. I've fed all the villages and freed all the prisoners across Kuri, Udon, Hakamai, Ringo, and Kibi. The flower capital is the last place we've reached. My goal here is to remove all of Orochi's influence, now that he's dead. Therefore, we will begin a witch hunt against all of Orochi's henchmen. At this moment, we won't be lenient with those who helped bring Wano to the state it's in now. After all, my objective was never to rule this country but to free it, as some of my crewmates have that goal, Luffy continued. He could see several people starting to flee from the crowd. All of them were connected to Kaido, Orochi, or those who had taken advantage of Wano's dire situation and didn't want to stay there and be exposed. Kuina, Yamato, Nojiko, you can take care of that, Luffy said as the three nodded and quickly disappeared. Only Luffy and Lucy remained at the scene. Anyway, here's the food, Luffy said, tossing crates that landed in the middle of the crowd. The flower capital might have been the least affected by the famine caused by Kaido and Wano, but in the last month, the situation had become dire even for its citizens. This explained why Orochi had been so upset, not because he wanted or needed to feed his people, but because he had lost resources for himself. The people reacted positively upon seeing the food and didn't hesitate to start grabbing the supplies, especially the hungriest among them. Luffy ignored the commotion and turned his gaze to a specific part of the crowd, where a green-haired woman in elegant attire stood with a guard by her side. Princess Hiyori, Luffy called directly, catching her by surprise, while many others turned to her with equal astonishment. The guard immediately touched the hilt of his sword. A red scabbard can't do anything against me, and you know that, Denjiro, Luffy mocked before turning back to Hiyori. Anyway, I'd like to speak with Odin's daughter. If you could accompany me, we'll just have a conversation, and your red scabbard can join as well. So, come with me to the castle, he said. Luffy turned and glanced at the still-burning castle. Pointing his finger, he flicked it toward the fire. In the next moment, an explosion erupted, extinguishing all the flames and further breaking down what remained of the structure with the sheer force of his two-fingered motion. What's left of it? Luffy remarked, looking at the nearly destroyed castle. Before moving forward, he used his ability to freeze time, ensuring the castle wouldn't collapse on them. Lucy accompanied him, while Hiyori hesitated for a moment before deciding to follow with Denjiro, as she had no other choice. Chapter 454, Wano 09. Third-person POV. New word. Hiyori went to the destroyed castle and found the pirate sitting with his sister, who was eating happily, thrilled to have found clean food there. You shouldn't eat just anything you find along the way, Lucy, Luffy said to his sister, eating the food left behind by someone who had been in the castle before. Who cares? It's food, isn't it? And it's delicious, she said, unconcerned with her brother's disapproval. Whatever. Luffy sighed and looked at the two people standing in front of them, waiting. You can sit on the couch in front of us, Luffy said, noticing their hesitation due to the almost collapsing ceiling. Don't worry about that, I'm holding the castle together so it won't fall on us, he added calmly, and they nodded before moving toward the couch. That sword. Denjiro couldn't help but notice the sword at Luffy's waist with a trace of astonishment. Enma. I got it from Kazuki Sukiyaki, and it belongs to none other than Hiyori, Luffy admitted. What? Hiyori exclaimed, not because of the sword but because of the name she heard. Yes. He's alive, if you want to know, but he's been in hiding all these years. Anyway. I'm borrowing this sword, and I'll return it in the end, Luffy said as his sister continued eating. You won't be able to defeat Kaido. Hiyori's voice was heard, causing even Lucy to stop eating and look at her, while Luffy seemed amused by the statement. And why do you think that? He asked. Because there's a prophecy that only when certain people appear will he finally be defeated, she replied. Tell me, Princess Hiyori, what will change when your brother Momonosuke, Kinemon, Reizo, Kanjuro, who, by the way, is an agent of Orochi and a traitor, show up? Luffy asked calmly, waiting for her response, while she looked quite shocked by what she heard. You know. Wait, are you saying that Kanjuro is a traitor? Denjiro exclaimed, surprised that Luffy knew such an important detail, let alone accusing Kanjuro of being a traitor. Hiyori said nothing, just staring at Luffy, wondering if he was lying or something, but he remained silent, keeping an amused glint in his eyes. Anyway, let's put that information aside. What I want to discuss with you is the future of Wano. Can I return the power of this country to the Kazuki family? Luffy asked. Wano belongs by right to the Kazuki family. Denjiro immediately replied. Well, I have no problem handing Wano over to them, but will they accept that this country will belong to my territory? Luffy said. What do you mean by that? Do you intend to become another Kaido? Hiyori asked, narrowing her eyes at Luffy. I won't be Kaido, but Wano will need me more than I need you. After all, I could have turned my back and never started this war. I could continue my journey until Kaido came looking for me, and I'd defeat him anyway. Even if Wano is freed from Kaido, it will face a massive food crisis. I'd estimate that 20% of the population will die without external help, not to mention the complete chaos over food, with people robbing and killing each other at that point. Even you red scabbards won't be able to control the entire country, Luffy spoke calmly as Lucy kept eating, but he maintained his sharp gaze on them, listening to his brother. What do you suggest, then? I still don't believe you'll defeat Kaido. Hiyori replied. It's fine. I don't need your belief to fight. Lucky me, Luffy said, standing up. He wanted to talk to them a bit more and organize a few things, but it was admittedly a bit disappointing. Let's go, sister, there's nothing more for us to do here, he said as Luffy grabbed the remaining food and stuffed it into his mouth. Wait, where are you going? Hiyori felt a bit lost as he simply walked away. Luffy had planned to assign her to take care of the city, but he gave up on the idea. I'm going to organize my final preparations and find someone to oversee the flower capital. Anyway, Denjiro, I've spoken to all the red scabbards except for Izo, who is outside of Wano. You're the last. Everyone is heading to Udon to fight Kaido since this may be the final chance to do so. Whether you believe in a prophecy about a boy and a few red scabbards magically defeating Kaido or not. Luffy spoke with a mocking tone, making Hiyori seem frustrated, unable to respond. Luffy knew she would cling to the prophecy no matter what, which was why he sensed her stubbornness and decided not to continue the conversation. Denjiro remained silent after hearing those words. Can you at least tell me where my grandfather will be? Hiyori asked. He's heading to Udon as well. He'll fight, Luffy said and continued. When the battle is over, Enma will be yours again, he said before leaving the castle. Denjiro, do you think Kaido will fall? Orochi is no longer alive. Hiyori murmured, unsure of what to think, her once unshakable beliefs beginning to falter under her father's words. Of course, Luffy staying there to try and convince her wouldn't have been very effective given his current attitude. He wasn't going to waste time persuading someone who, in the end, wouldn't make a difference to him whether they supported him or not. He was an emperor of the New World, aiming to dominate all the seas of the world as the supreme king. In the end, Denjiro escorted Hiyori out of the castle, which might soon lose the effects of Luffy's Moa Moa no Mi, and they left while the Straw Hat returned to the crowd, trying to organize the city now without a shogun. "You've done a good job," Luffy commented, looking at all the men captured by the three women while the ship was already visible, flying back toward the capital. "What will you do with them, Luffy?" There were at least 1,000 men tied up, looking at Luffy in fear. "We'll hold a trial. We have some time while those heading to fight Kaido are gathering in Udon as I instructed," Luffy said, starting to examine the documents Lami had also collected with her room. Among them were Orochi's payroll records. He might have been a selfish idiot, but he was clearly organized when it came to maintaining the loyalty of those who served him and avoiding giving out more resources than necessary. "Attention, everyone in the Flower Capital." Luffy began an announcement as everyone, still gathering food, turned to look at him. The sunny Golden domed the ground at that moment, with several men tied up on the deck. Additional Den Den mushes were visible, and Hiyori and Denjiro also watched as Luffy distanced himself from the ruined castle. "I'm going to start a trial for all those who worked with Kaido. Then, I will execute everyone on his payroll," he announced, leaving everyone stunned. With tears streaming down their faces, men were brought before Luffy in front of the crowd, pleading not to be executed. They claimed they had been forced to comply or that their crimes were not so severe. "It's okay. This is a trial. We'll start it, so relax," Luffy said, placing the first man, sobbing and kneeling, in front of him as he held Enma. One thing was for him not to kill a man in chains, but it was another to execute a death sentence after a fair trial. In that case, the punishment would be delivered by his sword. "You're called Gigi, and here it says you received a significant amount of money and resources from Orochi over the past year. Do you have anything to say about this?" Luffy asked. "I only did it because I needed to feed my family," he exclaimed. "Liar," someone in the crowd shouted immediately. Luffy turned back to the crowd. "The witnesses will be heard afterward. First, the man has the right to defend himself," he explained before returning his attention to the man. "I didn't kill anyone. I only did it so my son could eat something," he continued, crying. "Even so, did you hurt someone?" Luffy asked. "Yes, but it wasn't serious," he said, swallowing hard before answering. "I see. Now I want to hear from the witnesses. Is there anyone who wishes to accuse this man and speak about his crimes?" Luffy asked as his entire crew watched him conduct the trial. "I do. Me too. This man is a monster." More and more people approached, shouting accusations. Luffy nodded. "Let's go one at a time. You first," Luffy pointed to one of the people. "He destroyed my shop when I couldn't pay the personal tribute he demanded, charging more than Orochi ever asked for," an old man accused. "I see. Can anyone testify against this claim?" Luffy asked while everyone remained silent. "It seems no one wants to defend you. But let's hear about your other crimes to determine if you deserve the death penalty beyond just taking bribes," Luffy said, to the man's growing despair. "He killed my son. This man is a monster. He kidnapped my young daughter after killing her fiancé and sold her to a brothel in the Curry region. I haven't heard from her since. More and more people began recounting his crimes as Luffy nodded to each one, maintaining a neutral expression. He tried to remain impartial, like a judge. Not that he was a symbol of justice, but he intended to ensure fairness in this situation. "Well, it seems you're loaded with crimes," Luffy said in a tone of disgust, noting that no one had come forward to defend the man, suggesting the accusations were true and they were extensive. "Wait. That's a lie. They're lying. I have a family." The man couldn't finish his sentence before Enma separated his head from his neck, the head rolling to the side. "Anyone who has killed someone will lose their head, so don't be surprised. I'll make Orochi's murderers pay with their own lives," Luffy declared as the crowd looked on, stunned by the clean execution following his verdict. "Lami, next!" Luffy exclaimed. The next moment, the headless body disappeared, and another man was brought forward. "Let's continue. Let me see." Luffy began searching for the man's photo before proceeding with the trial. "No. I don't work for Orochi, they caught me by mistake," the man protested, clearly lying. Luffy didn't pay much attention to him until he found his name on the payroll list. "Let's continue," Luffy said, and hours passed as he continued judging Orochi's men. The vast majority lost their heads due to their crimes, even though most offenses were committed only in the capital. Heads rolled one after another, from men who now showed regret but didn't seem to have felt any when they were killing the people of Wano. This filled Luffy with deep disdain for them. Thus, he initiated his first act of cleansing in Wano. Meanwhile, the Den Mushi began ringing as Onigashima tried to issue more orders and receive reports from Wano, unaware that all the communication devices were now in the hands of the Straw Hats. Luffy had conquered Wano with only 9 crewmates and no significant difficulties. All that remained was to head to Onigashima and finally destroy Kaido and Big Mom once and for all. Chapter 455, Wano 10. Third-person POV. New word. The Den Mushi had been ringing for several minutes, but there was no response from the other side. "Damn it! What's going on with Orochi? He can't be ignoring us like this," complained a member of the Beast's pirates crew. "We should inform Boss Queen. We can't let Orochi get away with this," they concluded, heading to the boss's room while Queen was busy with some things in his laboratory. "Boss Queen!" the subordinates exclaimed as they approached, while Queen turned to them with his enormous body and a serious look. "Speak. Have the Straw Hats arrived or something like that?" he asked in a serious tone. "It's not that. We can't get in touch with the flower capital. Orochi must have betrayed us or something," the subordinates reported. "That?" Queen simply walked across the room and grabbed a Den Mushi from his desk, making a call himself. It rang for several minutes while his men kept staring at the device without any response. "Something's wrong," Queen murmured and started making another call. Once again, it began to ring. Hello, hello." A voice on the other side stammered slightly, trying to sound confident. Queen narrowed his eyes at this and continued, "Who am I speaking to?" he asked. "It's Pinocchio," the person on the other side said. "Pinocchio? I don't recall anyone by that name in Udon," Queen murmured, noticing the nervous expression on the Den Mushi's face. "Well, it's because I was in another division and got transferred, yeah, that's it," the person replied, sounding even more nervous. Tell me how things are in Udon," Queen demanded. "Everything's great." "Couldn't be better, sir," he exclaimed. "I see, very well." Queen simply nodded and hung up the Den Mushi. "Looks like everything is fine," the subordinates said naively, assuming that all was well. But not Queen, who appeared deep in thought. "I want you to take this message to the person with the card," Queen instructed in the end. He knew something must be happening in Wano but couldn't leave himself. It could be a trap laid by the Straw Hats right under his nose. He decided to send someone strong, but not a calamity, since everyone was needed in Onigashima for the war. "Understood, sir." "It will be done," the men nodded, leaving the room and heading through the corridors of Kaido's headquarters, passing various members of the Yonko's crew until they found the person they were looking for. "Sir, here is an order from Boss Queen," the men said to one of the underscore. "I see, understood." The person simply nodded, saying nothing more. There was work to be done, and they got up to head toward the Udon region. Meanwhile, Wano was also preparing, as people from all regions began filling the main streets across the country, aiming for Udon. Holding firearms and swords, they marched with determination to the agreed region, with the feeling that the time had come to fight for Wano. With determined eyes, they moved forward. The red scabbards, who had been hesitant, saw their own people rising. Not as individuals afflicted by hunger anymore, but as those who desired to see Wano freed. This even made the scabbards think that the time had come. Perhaps Kaido wouldn't fall because of Momonosuke and the others, but because the people themselves would free Wano for their arrival. In Udon, they began receiving these people, trying to hide them until the time was right, hoping that Kaido and his men wouldn't suspect anything until the moment arrived. Do you think you managed to fool him? Someone asked the person who had spoken to Queen on the Den Den Mushi. I don't know. The ordinary samurai murmured nervously. He was very tense, and perhaps that hadn't been convincing enough. Let it be. We'd better prepare ourselves, Kid said decisively. He's right, Hyagoro commented. Wolf. Chaochu was also present, barking, though no one there really understood him. My sword! Kawamatsu exclaimed joyfully, the only one who seemed lighthearted. After his sword was retrieved at Luffy's request, he was visibly thrilled to have his weapon again. Doji had already arrived, having departed right after Luffy left. He came to Udon with his group of bandits, finally joining everyone. My lord! At that moment, one of his subordinates arrived with a worried expression. Speak, Doji commanded. There's a beast pirate ship heading this way, the subordinate reported, and everyone immediately turned serious at the news. So they've arrived. Seems like it didn't work. Let's see who they sent, and we'll handle it, Hyagoro said, and several Yakuza members behind him nodded. Drake had been dispatched to Udon to assess the situation. After receiving Queen's orders, he was well aware of his precarious situation. As a member of the Tobi Rappo, Kaido's special group, and simultaneously acting as a marine infiltrator, his mission was highly delicate. His cover as a pirate and a member of the worst generation made things even more complex. Upon arriving at the port, he found several men watching him cautiously. Wasting no time, he went straight to the point. Take me to the prison. He stared intently at the men, who appeared far from confident. Nonetheless, they nodded and began to guide him. After a few minutes of walking toward the prison's vicinity, Drake stopped, his gaze fixed darkly on the central structure. Is something wrong, sir? One of the men asked cautiously. This is a trap, isn't it? Drake murmured, his haki alerting him to something amiss. Something felt terribly wrong. The prisoners had somehow escaped and taken over the prison, disguising themselves as beast pirates. And you're all samurai. Sensing the tension, Drake declared. Before he could continue, all the men raised their weapons at him. Yes, we are, and we're going to defeat you damned beast pirates, one of them shouted. Drake barely had time to react before being attacked. Cannons and bazookas were fired at him, creating massive explosions. The samurai celebrated as smoke engulfed the area. We've defeated him, one of the men exclaimed. But as the smoke cleared, a large shadow began to emerge. In his hybrid T-Rex form, Drake appeared, towering and menacing before them. He declared firmly. Well then, I'll have to deal with you. Even so, Drake harbored no intention of killing Wano's citizens. He understood their suffering and, as a Marine, adhered to his principles of justice. However, something unexpected occurred at that moment. Something leapt out of the prison and soared through the air, landing directly in front of him. Surprised, Drake saw a furry dog staring him down and barking fiercely. This. Drake muttered, frowning. He recognized the dog. His suspicion was confirmed moments later when the dog began to grow and sprout 3 heads, transforming into a gigantic 20-meter-tall creature, surpassing even Drake's full form. The 3 heads snarled ferociously at him. The Straw Hat's dog. Chaochu. I see. So they've already started to act, Drake murmured to himself as the situation became increasingly dire. More people began emerging from the main prison. Among them were 2 of the Red Scabbards, renowned and powerful samurai like Hyagoro, and even a supernova. Drake quickly recognized the figure standing before him. Finally, we meet again, Drake, Kid said, already shifting into a combat stance. Drake, now surrounded by formidable enemies, knew he was in a precarious position. Lord Queen. Once again, a subordinate barged into Queen's laboratory, interrupting him yet again. What is it now? Queen asked, visibly irritated. We've lost contact with Lord Drake, the subordinates reported. Queen narrowed his eyes at this news. So, it seems to be true, he murmured. If Drake fell so easily, it must be them. Queen declared. You, return to your posts. I'll handle this. He spoke while striding through the corridors of Onigashima, eventually arriving at a massive hall. There, Kado was seated in his enormous chair, drinking while crying, with Black Maria serving him. Nearby was Big Mom, seated at a table piled with food served by her children. She ate cheerfully. Why haven't the Straw Hats shown up yet? This is getting so boring. I'm just going to end up drinking and crying all the time, Kado complained, with Jack standing beside him. Stop whining like that, Kado. We have time to eat, and that's a good thing. I'd hate to be interrupted at a moment like this, Big Mom interjected. What are you saying, you old hag? Kado grumbled at her. Who are you calling an old hag, you wrinkled geezer? Big Mom retorted, and the two began a heated argument, exchanging insults, a common occurrence in recent months. Everyone else could only stand there, listening. It was at that moment that Queen entered through the doors, heading toward Kado. Lord Kado. Queen called, catching his attention. Kado turned to him. Tell me the Straw Hats have arrived. I'm getting bored here and annoyed with this hag, he complained. You? Big Mom grumbled. That's exactly what I'm here to talk about, my lord, Queen said, immediately capturing Kado's attention. He stopped drinking and arguing, turning serious. They've arrived? Kado asked. More than that, my lord. They're already here. We've lost contact with Wano. I sent Drake to investigate Udon, and we've lost contact with him as well. He's likely fallen, Queen explained. This made Kado suddenly rise to his feet, drawing everyone's attention. Even Big Mom stopped eating and looked serious. So, they're already here. Kado muttered, setting his cup aside. I will deal with them personally. There's no way they've taken Wano right under our noses, he declared, visibly angry, as he prepared to transform into his dragon form and fly to Wano to check the situation. No one seemed able to stop him. At that moment, a figure emerged behind Queen, walking casually. Queen turned, curious, but his eyes widened when he saw who it was. Kado, who was about to depart, also noticed the presence. His gaze fell on the man, and his eyes widened in surprise. Everyone recognized the figure. It was none other than Zoro, the Straw Hat swordsman with a bounty exceeding 1 billion, strolling calmly through the hall. What a waste to spill drinks like that, Zoro remarked, glancing at Kado's massive mug on the floor as the liquid spread out. His gaze returned to Kado. Hey, big guy, can you tell me where the flower capital is? I was supposed to be heading there but got lost, he asked calmly, completely unfazed by Kado's overwhelming presence. The entire hall was stunned to see a Straw Hat casually wandering in, seemingly lost, and boldly asking for directions. Chapter 456, The War Between Three Emperors begins. Third-person POV. New word. I think it's time for us to go, Luffy said as it had been 3 days since they had arrived at the flower capital, starting a sequence of executions carried out over those days. When the last member who worked for Orochi had fallen, Luffy sighed. After days and nights without rest, he executed them one by one according to their crimes. There were people who were spared but destined for some prisons to spend time as punishment. However, most had destroyed many lives and abused the people while doing Orochi's dirty work. At the end of it all, Luffy was just making the final preparations, gathering information from various groups, while the people of the capital were also preparing. On the last day, Hiyori tried to speak once more, but Luffy dismissed all her attempts. He simply didn't care about the girl anymore, nor about the last of the Red Scabbards, who had already done their part in inviting him. As Luffy was about to store some of his documents, he felt Yamato coming toward him. Luffy, everyone is ready, Yamato said, entering the captain's cabin. All right, I was just heading out. But what about you? Are you prepared? Today we will fight your father, Luffy asked, looking at Yamato with curiosity. I am, Luffy. Ever since you sent me to East Blue, as soon as I saw that I was free from those chains, I was already prepared to face him. So today, we'll finish this, Yamato said firmly, as Luffy rose from his chair and walked outside along with Yamato. Then let's get started, Luffy said, stepping out of the cabin. Outside, Nami, Reiju, Lucy, Nojiko, and Kuina were waiting. There was a crowd of people, mostly men, but not limited to them, as some women were carrying weapons. Everyone was prepared, wearing armor, swords, and weapons that Luffy had provided. "Are you ready?" Luffy asked loudly to everyone. "Yes. We are ready to free Wano," they exclaimed, and Luffy nodded. "Great, then let's head to Udon," Luffy said, beginning to take a few objects from his pocket and throwing them into an open area beside the ship. Ships began to appear at full size. There were no special features on the ships, but they were well made. Frankie had designed them over the last year in Skypiea since Luffy wanted to have a small fleet of empty ships, just in case. He had 20 of these but dropped only 4 of them on the ground, while people looked on in admiration. All those who were going to fight board the ships. "I'll shrink their size and take them south for a few hours," he explained. Everyone quickly began climbing the ladders and settling onto the ships. 2 people also entered who stood out. Luffy was a little surprised that they were coming after all, even after all the attempts the woman had made to speak with him. "Whatever," Luffy muttered, shrugging in the end. Once everyone was ready, he went to the ships, began to shrink them, and placed them in an open box. Then, he returned to the Black Pearl. "Let's go." Luffy gave the order, and Lami quickly started moving the ship toward Udon. A few hours later, they arrived. There was a much larger crowd near the sea, gathering people from all regions of Wano, and Luffy heard explosions coming from Onigashima. "What's that? Is someone fighting?" Nojiko asked, unsure. "These explosions have been happening for days, according to the people in Udon," Luffy commented. He knew what that meant since he had left a certain someone in Curry. Silently, he held a vivre card in his hand, which pointed him directly to Onigashima. "Man, I wonder how you managed to pull off such feats, Zoro." Luffy murmured, unable to believe that the swordsman had somehow managed to reach Onigashima from Curry. After all, the plan was for them to meet in the flower capital or wait for them to return to Curry. Luffy checked if the vivre card had shown any signs of danger in the last 2 days since the commotion had started, but it was fine, which meant that Zoro was fine. Luffy put away the vivre card, and the ship began to land with Lami steering it. In front of him, a crowd of thousands, reaching more than 30,000 men from Wano, were prepared to fight. "So many people," Kuina murmured. "It seems that Luffy's words encouraged them to fight," Nojiko commented, observing the scene. The ship landed near the factory gates, but a bit distant from them. Behind the crowd, chaos was visible, with Onigashima glowing at certain points of fire. "Look, things are quite heated here," Luffy observed as he disembarked. Chaochu and the others followed. All of the Red Scabbards, Kakunajo, Ashuradoji, Jibuman, Shinobu, Kawamatsu, and Denjiro were present, with only a few members missing. The Minks, Inuarashi and Nekomamushi, were arriving with the fleet, and Aizo was with members of the old Whitebeard crew. Luffy didn't know if he would come here. The last ones, Kinemon and Reizo, were still returning from the past. "Yes, we're just waiting. Everyone has already arrived. Some are delayed, from what we hear, but most are here," Hyogoro said seriously. "Got it, but we have no more time to wait. We arrived at exactly the right moment," Luffy declared as he looked at the crowd. There was no longer any problem gathering such a multitude there. After all, the beast pirates were quite busy with the explosions happening day after day on the island. "Everyone!" Luffy exclaimed, calling everyone's attention. He also took out the 3 ships he had brought from the flower capital. More people began to join the crowd. "Today, we are here to end Wano's oppression," he said with a smile. "I know many of you don't know us and even distrust us, but be certain of one thing. Today, I will give you a chance to fight for your parents who have been silenced for over 20 years. Today, we will begin the revolution to restore Wano to what it should be," Luffy spoke, as many nodded at his words. Kazuki Sukiyaki and Kid were also there, among other important figures, while Luffy's crew appeared on the deck to hear their captain speak. "So before we march to Onigashima, I want to show you the first step of this revolution against the Kaido and Orochi regime. Even though Orochi is already dead, only Kaido remains," he declared, while many, who didn't know, were shocked to learn that Orochi was dead. To prove it, Luffy took a container from his pocket, holding up a head and throwing it in front of the crowd. Orochi's head was severed, slightly burned after the explosion at the castle, but Luffy had preserved it for this purpose. His devil fruit had even appeared in the system for purchase, proof that he was truly dead. Luffy then moved to the next act, pulling a Den Den mushi from his pocket with a button. "Pay attention," Luffy declared and pointed toward the factories. The moment he pressed the button, all the factories glowed. Then hundreds of explosions began to occur at every peak, lighting up the scene for everyone watching. The explosions destroyed everything with Dyna stones. Boom! 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 The explosions obliterated each of the towers, as the sound echoed throughout Udon and beyond. It could even draw the attention of Onigashima. While many beast pirates on their ships were stunned by what had happened, a battle was already raging in the middle of Onigashima. Everyone there looked on in shock as things calmed down, and they could only see what remained of the factories. Now, only half of the peak was visible, while everything else had turned to dust. "Great, now let's get ready to finally head to Onigashima," Luffy exclaimed as his gaze lifted to the sky. The clouds didn't reveal much of the sky. It was mid-afternoon, but everything seemed a bit darker as small shadows began to appear. In the sky, a fleet composed of 110 ships and more than 18,000 pirates, trained by Luffy with 25 captains, advanced, finally entering Wano. "We're arriving," Usopp announced, using a magnifying glass in a corner of the ship. "Great, Bippo, get ready to put all the ships down," Nami said. "Leave it to me," Bippo, still wearing his wig, replied as the ships finally neared Onigashima. "Attention, everyone, prepare for battle," Jinbe announced through a Den Den mushi, organizing the entire fleet. All 25 captains, along with their crews, nodded as they prepared. "The time has finally come. Do you think we'll see the other scabbards too?" Nekomamushi asked. "I hope so. After all, this is the best opportunity to take down Kaido," Inuarashi replied, preparing on his ship with many minks alongside him. The ships began to tip forward as they advanced, diving into the lower clouds and starting to enter the territory of Wano and Kaido. "Kuina, Yamato, and Chaochu, this is up to you now," Luffy said. It was good to have these three members here. After all, they all had ice-based abilities, and taking people by ship all the way to Onigashima was no longer efficient. Yamato transformed into her beast form, becoming the 20-meter-tall Okuchi no Makami. Kuina transformed into Shiva, flying into the sky, and finally, Chaochu became Cerberus. Okuchi no Makami and Cerberus opened their mouths as energy began to accumulate in them, while Shiva concentrated her icy energy in her hands. The next moment, all three mythical beasts unleashed their ice powers onto the sea, and it immediately began to freeze, combining in a way that could rival Kuzan and his fruit. The ice quickly spread from Udon's coast and advanced toward Onigashima, creating a giant bridge and taking the people on Onigashima by surprise. The red scabbards were astonished. Finally, a path had been made for them to go directly to their enemy. "Chaochu, Kuina, Nojiko, I want you to lead and help everyone get to Onigashima. Lucy, Lamy, Reiju, Yamato, and I will go ahead with Sai," Luffy said, as the three nodded. "Sai," Luffy called. Sai nodded and opened a door in space. Everyone Luffy mentioned entered the door, and it disappeared. "You heard him, everyone, let's go," Kuina said in her Shiva form. Everyone nodded, grabbing their weapons, as the first steps exploded against the ice, moving from the coast and advancing toward Onigashima at that moment. We need to warn Boss Kaido about this," one of the beast pirates said, staring at the ice freezing the sea where Onigashima connected to Wano. "Yes, we must go immediately," another agreed, as a shadow passed through the sun, which peeked between the clouds like small rays. "What is that?" They pointed at the sky before widening their eyes, because, in the next moment, 100 ships began to emerge from the clouds, descending at full speed. A moment later, everyone stationed on the ships and outside Onigashima's walls fell into a panic. The war began on 3 fronts. The fleet arriving from the sky, the people of Wano revolting against Kaido's regime as they ran across the frozen sea to Onigashima, and a group infiltrating directly into the heart of Onigashima, where Zoro had already been fighting for days after ending up in the enemy's lair once again after getting lost. Chapter 457 Yonko's Haki. Third-person POV. New word. Zoro was dodging a powerful Conqueror's Haki attack as Kaido's Kanabo swept past him with the Raimei hack strike, destroying the side of the room where he had evaded. Zoro took a few steps back while glaring at Kaido. His face was bleeding, and his body also appeared injured. Yet, all Zoro had on his face was a bored expression despite the wounds. This frustrated Kaido, as the purple lightning from his last attack still crackled around his weapon. "Why don't you fight? We've been at this for days, and you just dodge without drawing your sword." The strongest creature in the world was annoyed with the Straw Hat Swordsman, who had invaded his base and refused to fight him, even after 2 days since Zoro had shown up there, asking for the location of the flower capital. "Because I don't want to interfere in the war before Luffy and the others arrive," Zoro remarked. "So boring." Kaido complained angrily, yet refrained from launching another attack at Zoro. All the members of his crew and Big Mom's crew were there, pointing weapons at Zoro as they surrounded him. "Lord Kaido," the beast pirates murmured, watching Kaido walk away to his chair, seemingly unconcerned. The base was filled with destruction from the attacks aimed at Zoro, while the swordsman simply dodged, refusing to truly fight back. "You're going to let this brat live?" Big Mom appeared as well, expecting Kaido to have already killed him. "He refuses to fight, so I'm going to drink for a while. After 2 days of constant fighting, I'm a little bored and want some alcohol," Kaido said, sitting down on a chair. Zoro remained silent. He was still injured, but without serious damage. Somehow, he had ended up there, appearing as though the flower capital had been lost to him while he was en route to meet the others after mastering Odin's sword. "Then leave him to me. I'll devour his soul." Big Mom decided to act, while Kaido shrugged. "Whatever, just don't destroy my island," Kaido replied, sipping his drink. Zoro looked at the large woman, stepping forward as his figure became increasingly demonic, with a glowing red gaze. She stared at him with her tongue out, as if she saw food to devour, but Zoro kept his focus on her, showing no trace of fear. "Will Mama be able to consume the soul ears of the swordsman worth over 1 billion berries?" one of Big Mom's children asked, excited to see Zoro fall into despair. "That Zoro. He's not even moving, as if inviting Mama herself to come at him," murmured Katakuri, watching seriously from a corner with his siblings, a scarf covering his mouth, arms crossed, paying close attention to what would happen next. Big Mom raised her hand as if Zoro's soul was manifesting and she was pulling it out. She tried to extract it to drain his years of life. Zoro, however, didn't move an inch. As she tried to pull, nothing happened. She even tried to exert more effort, but nothing happened, while Zoro kept staring at her, his face bleeding. "This brat. I can't take his years," she murmured, slightly frustrated and surprised. Zoro seemed far too insignificant to be this strong, in her opinion. "Luffy told me about your power," Zoro said for the first time, looking directly at Big Mom. "He said you can only take the souls of those who fear you. You're big, but you don't scare me," Zoro declared, leaving Big Mom completely stunned. "What did you say, brat?" she exclaimed angrily, raising her arm and slamming it down to shatter the ground, expecting to crush Zoro, but the swordsman easily dodged, leaping backward. Big Mom's fist was incredibly powerful, making the entire room tremble as cracks spread across it. Kaido stopped drinking and looked at his ally with frustration as she continued to damage the room. "Prometheus." She saw Zoro slipping out of her reach, and a sun emerged from behind her, its face beaming joyfully. "Mama," the sun said cheerfully. "Burn him," Big Mom exclaimed, pointing at Zoro. "Of course, Mama," the sun replied before its expression turned more ferocious. Quickly, it began to ignite, transforming into a more violent sun. In the next moment, it unleashed a fiery explosion toward Zoro, like a focused beam. The attack was so vast that Zoro couldn't dodge it, shaking the entire island as the flames erupted against that side of the room. "Hey, old hag. What did I say about not destroying my island?" Kaido shouted as the flames burst out through Onagashima's walls, striking the sea and releasing steam as they touched the water. Big Mom ignored Kaido's words as she saw Zoro emerging from the flames. His entire body was cloaked in armament haki, protecting him from the attack. He walked out unscathed, though his shirt was burning. That was a fine attack, Zoro admitted, curiously observing the destruction as his haki dissipated without leaving any burns on him. That brat! I'm going to have to go all out. Big Mom muttered. In the next moment, a cloud appeared by her side, summoning Zeus. Even her sword materialized in her hand, signaling that she was becoming more serious about taking down one of the most powerful members of the Straw Hats. Kaido was also frustrated by the destruction Big Mom had caused and stood up. Hey, what did I say about this? Aren't you listening to me, you old hag? He said, clearly irritated. But before he could take a step to confront Big Mom, members of the Beast Pirates and Big Mom Pirates came rushing in, panicked, entering the partially destroyed room. Boss Kaido! Mama! They shouted in unison, finally catching the attention of the two giants, who had barely noticed them. They continued, ships are coming to Onigashima. The Straw Hat Fleet has arrived. These words finally drew the attention of both Kaido and Big Mom. What? They've finally come? Kaido murmured, a smile spreading across his face. It's about time we faced them, old hag, he said, as Zoro also smiled, finally ready to fight. Looks like I can finally fight. He commented, placing his hand on the hilt of his swords. Not just that, Boss Kaido. Along with several ships descending from the sky, the sea in front of Wano has completely frozen. We saw a large group making their way here across the ice, the same men continued reporting. I should have realized when this intruder mentioned needing to go to the flower capital. Kaido muttered with a serious expression. Whatever. I'll destroy the ice, he declared, already beginning to transform into a dragon, seemingly unaware that Udon's factories had been destroyed, as the men hadn't had the chance to report it. But at that moment, in the middle of the room, a door suddenly appeared. What's the rush, Kaido? You should be worrying about us, not some group of samurai. Luffy's voice echoed as the door opened. Suddenly, the Straw Hat, along with his sister Lucy, Yamato, Reiju, Lami, and Sai, stepped into the room, leaving everyone shocked. You! Kaido quickly turned, surprised to see Luffy and his companions, especially his daughter by Luffy's side. Their sudden arrival was so unexpected that not even his haki had sensed it. Big Mom gritted her teeth upon seeing him, one of the culprits behind the destruction of her territory a year ago when the Straw Hats had sent meteors. Well, what do we have here? Luffy spoke in a neutral tone, while Yamato maintained a serious gaze toward her father. Lucy, standing next to Luffy, looked surprised, seeing the two Yonkos for the first time and curiously observing them. Lami and Reiju were alert to any movement from anyone in the room who might attack them before Luffy gave the order. So, you've come, brat. Kaido murmured with a serious and grim look at Luffy, who was walking directly toward him, taking firm, fearless steps as he approached the strongest creature in the world. Yes. It seems we have some matters to settle, Kaido. I'm here to resolve our differences. After all, by the dawn of this night, there will be fewer of us Yonko. The new world will change then. Luffy replied in a somber tone. This made everyone in the room swallow hard. Luffy appeared calm, but his presence was overwhelming, proving he was worthy of his title, a pressure that no one there could ignore. And it wasn't just him, even his companions exuded an evident sense of danger. Kaido stepped forward, causing the ground to explode beneath his leg as he glared at Luffy with a dark expression. Don't get ahead of yourself, brat. After all, it will be you who falls today. And I'll take my granddaughter from your hands, as I've already said, Kaido growled. What did you say? Yamato responded, this time glaring at her father with anger. Her expression clearly showed how much she disliked Kaido's tone when referring to her daughter. I'm saying I won't leave you alive. At the very least, I'll take my granddaughter back and train her, Kaido stated firmly. You shouldn't have said that so easily, Kaido, Luffy commented, now with a more serious tone. His expression shifted dramatically, becoming even darker after hearing Kaido's words. Luffy was never in a good mood when someone threatened his family. Kaido observed him, lifting his kanabo and resting it on his shoulder, daring Luffy to make a move. In the next moment, Luffy's eyes gleamed with a dangerous light, and he unleashed his Conqueror's Haki. Kaido responded with equal intensity, and the two waves of Haki clashed violently, causing an explosion throughout the room. Big Mom, watching everything, also released her Conqueror's Haki to shield herself from the waves of energy erupting between the two. Even so, the combined Haki of Luffy, Kaido, Lucy, Zoro, Yamato, Reiju, and Lamy collided in a massive standoff. The impact was devastating. The explosion of Haki destroyed the room's door, striking down many pirates who lacked the strength to withstand the pressure. Only a few, relying on their own Haki, managed to resist and shield the weaker ones, though with great difficulty, as 3 of those Haki waves came from Yonko. All of Onigashima trembled from the clash, with yellow lightning exploding in every direction. The shock even disturbed the sea, causing it to churn violently. All the ships and armies approaching the island across the ice saw the explosion emanating from Onigashima. The war had begun, and this was the definitive signal that the new world would change from this battle onward. Chapter 458, Fleet Advance 01. Third-person POV. New word. The explosion of Conqueror's Haki continued to surge beyond the walls of Onigashima as the region seemed to tremble and the very space around Wano distorted with both Hakis clashing. "They've started," Hachi remarked in surprise aboard the ship, as the main crew members looked on from the first ship approaching. "The Hakis themselves are even protecting the other members," Jinbei observed, noticing that no one was being affected, as the Hakis acted like shields against other users to avoid harming allies. "Anyway, they're aiming the cannons at us," Usopp exclaimed with his spyglass. "Let's hurry, we have to reach Luffy," Shirahoshi said excitedly. "Attention all fleet members. Attention! We are about to be attacked by the enemy. Prepare to counterattack," Jinbei shouted to the fleet. "Let's see if they can handle this," Baby 5 said, heading to the ship's bow as her body began transforming into weapons. "I'll help too," Usopp said as his body started changing, gradually taking on the draconic form of his icon. "It's time to show off our weapons," Frankie exclaimed with a grin. "I'm heading to the command room," Shirahoshi said as she flew into the ship. While the Straw Hat ship prepared, the other ships in the fleet right behind them also began positioning themselves to attack Onigashima. Hancock stood at the bow of her ship, gazing down as the vessel tilted slightly at an angle, with the snake still pulling it, though it was really Bepo controlling the entire fleet. On that same ship, all the Amazons were ready to fight. Although they didn't have long-range weapons, they were waiting to get closer to begin the battle. "Okay, we can only hope that Luffy's companions can stop all the attacks," Hancock commented. Other ships in the fleet quickly began arming themselves, such as the Yanta Maria Grand Fleet, the Happo Navy, and Tesoro's Golden City. Many other ships and fleet members were also preparing for the assault. Foxy stood ready with his devil fruit, just like Bartolomeo and other users scattered across the ships. Everyone was getting ready after Jinbei's warning about the enemy's reception. They drew closer and closer as even islands began to emerge from the clouds, advancing toward Onigashima. Meanwhile, the Beast Pirates and Big Mom Pirates watched the island shaking from the Haki explosion inside, caused by the Yonko. Though they were surprised by it, Queen appeared at that moment to bring order to all the ships surrounding the island. "Prepare to attack the enemies," he shouted. What stood out most, however, was the enormous fleet coming toward them from the sky. The commanders began organizing after Queen's orders. "Quick, quick! We must stop them. Don't let them get close. Prepare all the cannons," yelled one of the officers. "Damn it! There are so many ships." "Over 100, murmured one of the Beast Pirates as he watched. Finally, they spotted the largest of the ships, or rather, the two islands, approaching. "What? They're bringing islands here too? What kind of madness is this?" one of the pirates shouted. "There's a ship made of gold, and it's gigantic." Another pointed toward Grand Tesoro. There are also people coming from the frozen sea. What should we do? Another asked, looking at Queen, who already saw through his spyglass thousands of people heading from Wano. Target them with the cannons as well. Aim at most of the ships, ordered the Calamity as the enemy alliance's fleet drew closer and closer. Big Mom's massive ship, stationed at Onigashima, stood out with its enormous size. Its crew began preparing the cannons, aiming hundreds of them at the sky. In the middle of the ice, 30,000 people were rushing toward Onigashima while the area seemed to explode with haki. But the forces pressed on, shouting war cries as they charged to face Kaido once and for all alongside the Straw Hats, while the fleet's ships descended from the sky toward Onigashima. A person sped past them at high velocity, while Kuina, transformed into Shiva, dove through the sky with incredible speed. She stopped some distance above the Wano army, gazing at the island. They're preparing to attack the ships, and we're also their targets, Kuina called out to everyone. Prepare to defend against the cannonballs, she exclaimed with authority. Her voice reached everyone as Kuina advanced through the air using Jeppo. Chaochu, transformed into Cerberus, was also getting ready to fight. The red scabbards, present in Wano, ran alongside the crowd, their hands gripping the hilts of their weapons, preparing to counter the enemy attack. The members of the Yakuza and all the men and women of Wano surged forward, shouting without pause, even as hundreds of cannons were poised to kill them. TSK. I'm going to kill Kaido. Kid shouted, running ahead with a mix of vengeance and determination. At that moment, as all the cannons were prepared to fire, Queen, the commander of the Beast Pirates, raised his hand to signal the attack. Fire, he yelled. Boom! Boom! All the ships stationed at Onigashima began firing their cannons, targeting both the sky and the icy ground. The explosive sound echoed across the battlefield, even as haki continued to emanate throughout the area. In the sky, the Straw Hats fleet watched as Onigashima remained locked in a haki clash. Suddenly, every ship erupted with thousands of cannonballs launched in all directions. Everything became clear as the projectiles streaked directly toward them, glowing red dots rapidly closing in. On the fleet's flagship, the Black Pearl, preparations were already underway. Various devices were being activated, with massive cannons emerging from the ship's sides and bow. The figurehead of Ifrit began to open its mouth, revealing a colossal barrel extending from within. Inside the weapons control room, Shirahoshi adjusted the cannon positions. The room was filled with advanced technology as she pressed buttons rapidly. This looks super explosive, Frankie said enthusiastically as he watched the ship, brimming with weapons, readying for combat. Frankie had installed many of the weapons or modified those that came with the ship. He then jumped into a tank-like structure aboard the ship, something he had spent the last year preparing to unleash devastating attacks. Get ready to fire everything we've got, he declared with satisfaction, adjusting his goggles as the tank's barrel aimed at the enemies. Baby Five stood atop Ifrit's figurehead, finishing adjustments to her arms, which had transformed into a massive weapon. The cannon extended 5 meters and was covered in intricate technology, with buttons and glowing lights. She had learned even more powerful techniques than those used by pacifistas and was eager to test them here. Steadying herself to avoid being thrown back by the attack, she infused her body with haki as extra protection. Usopp, already transformed into his draconic form, leaped from the ship. His massive body, now the size of the ship itself, roared as his wings unfurled above the Black Pearl. Light began gathering around him, the glow intensifying as he prepared for a devastating attack aimed at Onigashima. The battle was about to commence as the cannonballs hurtled toward the fleet. They streaked across the sky like shooting stars. Activate the barrier, Bartolomeo shouted from the Bardo Club, crossing his fingers with a grin as a massive barrier materialized in front of his ship and many others, thanks to his enhanced abilities. Hancock, aboard the lead ship, gestured to her Amazons. Prepare yourselves. Destroy anything that breaches the defenses. The Amazons immediately adjusted their bows, arrows infused with haki glowing brightly as they waited for the right moment. Meanwhile, in the weapons room of the Black Pearl, Shirahoshi pressed the final commands. Manual firing system activated, she declared as the ship's turrets began rotating, targeting the incoming cannonballs. This is going to be fun, Shirahoshi commented as she placed her hand on the trigger, ready to press it. In the next moment, she did. Immediately, all the cannons aimed at the sky began firing, one after another. Boom! Boom! Even Beppo struggled to keep the ship moving forward due to the force of each shot, which seemed to pull the ship backward with every impact. Shirahoshi, noticing this, quickly began pressing more buttons on the control panel. There was a new button, protected by a cover, which she had to remove before pressing it. As soon as her finger touched the button, the main cannon at the ship's bow began to glow intensely, almost causing the ship to lurch backward. However, a stabilizing force prevented this, and the ship continued firing a beam of energy that lit up the entire sky. Frankie adjusted himself in his tank. He started firing, releasing a force similar to the cannons, though not as powerful as the ship's main cannon, which still illuminated the sky. Baby 5 began charging her weapon. A brilliant glow traveled through the energy line to the tip of her cannon. She could feel her body trembling under the concentration of force. It was a plasma shot, and as she steadied her stance, lightning began to crackle around her weapon. When she finally fired, the purple beam shot directly toward Shirahoshi's attack, further intensifying the brightness. Bahamut also completed charging his attack. Multiple beams of light were launched in rapid succession, hundreds of them cascading downward like a storm of energy. It wasn't just the main Straw Hats attacking. All the fleet's ships began firing their cannons, unleashing a coordinated assault on the enemies of Onigashima. "What is this?" the beast pirates murmured, shielding their faces as multiple flashes filled the sky above. "What kind of attack is this?" some muttered nervously, gulping as they struggled to see through the intense light. In the next moment, the projectiles collided in midair, creating chain explosions that lit up the sky. The chaos was amplified by additional attacks, obliterating everything in their path. Above Onigashima, the heavens became a chaotic scene of explosions, flashes, and smoke. No one could clearly tell who was winning. However, several cannonballs managed to bypass the defenses, heading toward Bartolomeo's barrier or being intercepted by the Amazons, who destroyed anything that got too close to their side of the fleet. More and more Devil Fruit users joined in to help stop the onslaught. The same couldn't be said for the beast pirates. As soon as the first explosion hit, multiple attacks surged directly toward them, with nothing to stop the devastation. The beams of energy came with overwhelming force, leaving the pirates to face an unavoidable sense of impending doom. In the next moment, Onagashima's base began to erupt in a series of explosions, decimating their ranks of ships. The chaos spread as the coordinated attacks of the Straw Hat Fleet gave them a decisive advantage in the battle. The war had only just begun, but the Straw Hats were already determined to demonstrate their absolute power. Chapter 459, Fleet Advance 02. Third-person POV. New word. Before the fleet's gunfire began sweeping through the first ships, cannonballs in the frozen sea area flew into the sky. The small red spheres rose for a moment with a screeching sound before starting to fall toward the army. As they were about to reach Wano's 30,000 soldiers, a massive paw struck the ground, shattering it into pieces as Cerberus roared with its 3 heads in a canine growl. Chaochu then opened its 3 mouths, aiming at the cannonballs. Its 3 elements began to gather before it finally unleashed powerful bolts of lightning, ice, and fire into the sky. These elemental strikes soared upward, colliding with the cannonballs, while its heads moved, sending streaks of energy through different directions in the sky. The ferocious pirates could barely understand what was happening, their attention fixed on the fleet launching its counterattack. However, Chaochu couldn't intercept all the cannonballs, leaving many still advancing. "Leave it to us." The red scabbards sprang into action, drawing their weapons as they leaped toward the first group of cannonballs that would hit the front of the army. With swift movements, they began slicing through the projectiles with incredible speed, cleaving them in half. Some unleashed advanced techniques with flying slashes aimed at the cannonballs. Explosions erupted as the cannonballs were quickly intercepted, but it wasn't enough to stop them all. Many continued their trajectory, heading straight for the Wano army. "It's still not enough," one of them shouted, seeing the cannonballs now falling toward the main army as it ran, threatening to strike everyone head-on. At that moment, Shiva appeared, creating enormous ice shields, each over 20 meters in diameter. The shields floated in the air, intercepting the cannonballs and protecting the Wano soldiers as they ran despite the looming danger. With only a few cannonballs left flying, Reiju dashed forward using Jeppo in the air. She began punching the cannonballs with explosive strikes, unharmed due to her own explosive nature. Being stronger than the red scabbards, she effortlessly hunted down the remaining cannonballs until none were left. The people of Wano watched in awe as the ice shields began transforming above them. "Let's keep going," someone shouted, rallying the troops forward. "For Wano! To take down Kaido! Today we free Wano from Kaido's chains!" As they shouted atop the icy ground, Shiva manipulated her ice, shaping it into massive spear-like spikes. She pointed them toward the island and launched them with tremendous force. The sky was clear, and the beast pirates had no time to react as the gigantic ice spikes crashed into their ships. The sheer force and size of the attacks, comparable to the ships themselves, devastated them completely, splitting them apart. The enemy pirates screamed in despair, unable to comprehend what was happening beyond their ships being destroyed, blinded by the light still pouring from the sky. Even Wano's army had to shield their faces from the brilliance of the fleet's attacks colliding with the enemy cannons. Finally, the fleet began gaining the upper hand, advancing downward. Soon, part of the ships in front of Onigashima started exploding, causing the ice itself to tremble. "They've created an opening. Let's go!" Nojiko exclaimed as she continued running through the sky, seeing the enemy ships occupied with the fleet. She seized the opportunity to get closer without being attacked again. Shiva followed, leading the way alongside Chaochu. The situation was dire for Kaido's and Big Mom's forces. Those who survived the first impact stared in terror as dozens of their ships were destroyed and thousands of soldiers lost their lives. Not even bones were left behind from the devastating attacks, as the sea turned into a massive void. "They have that much power? What kind of technology is this?" Queen murmured, surprised, analyzing the cannons with a furrowed brow. He didn't know the Straw Hats possessed such weapons. "We can't let them launch that attack again," he muttered, turning to his men. "Don't let them launch it again. Attack them. We can't let them get closer." Queen shouted to his men, paralyzed by the devastation. He knew he couldn't do much more against the enemy now, but he also couldn't simply roll out the red carpet for the Straw Hats and their allies, inviting them in. As everyone nodded, starting to prepare other cannons to fire at the fleet again, a member of Kaido's crew approached Queen. "Sir Queen, the attack on Wano's army has also failed. They're continuing to advance, and several of our ships have been destroyed in that area by gigantic ice," he exclaimed, handing over a report about the situation at Onegashima's flank. "If we can't hit them, aim at the ice. Destroy the entire bridge, so they can't cross," Queen ordered. Quickly, his men nodded, and the orders were relayed. The ships on the flank began to reposition, aiming downward at the ice below. The cannons were adjusted, and soon, cannonballs began firing toward the ice. Each impact shattered the frozen bridge, turning it into seawater that shot up in sprays. The once solid ice bridge began breaking apart, replaced by open sea. "They're trying to stop us from reaching Onigashima," one of Wano's men murmured, worried. Shiva saw this and quickly began creating enormous ice pillars, launching them directly at the enemy ships, shattering them just as before. She prevented them from continuing to break the ice bridge. More and more ships were destroyed as her endless ice spears wreaked havoc, demolishing over 50 ships. The devastation was absolute, creating a wave of death until no more cannonballs could be fired. "What are we going to do?" one of the red scabbards asked, watching the water spray and sweep away everything connecting Onigashima to their army. Despite the setback, he wasn't ready to give up. "Just keep moving. Don't worry about that," Nojiko shouted as she leaped through the air, confident the others would act soon. Chaochu was already preparing its icy breath with its frost-covered head. Even after destroying all the ships, Shiva began concentrating her energy as well. Together, she and Chaochu unleashed a freezing blast, amplifying the chilling impact on the sea. The powerful blasts quickly reached the destroyed area, beginning to refreeze it. The bridge that had been lost just moments before was recreated as the water solidified, allowing Wano's army to finally continue toward their goal. The same went for the Straw Hats, who were drawing closer, firing their weapons to prevent any cannonballs from hitting them. Although some of their ships were damaged by explosions around the fleet, Bepo remained steadfast, leading the charge as they decimated more and more beast pirates and Big Mom's forces than they lost themselves. "This is bad," Queen murmured, watching the Straw Hat's ship heading straight for him. He immediately began transforming into his Brachiosaurus form to try and stop the advancing ship. But Bepo didn't halt. The ship barreled toward him, colliding with explosive force. The impact struck Queen head-on, and despite his efforts to hold the ship back, he was dragged across the ground, his legs carving into the earth. Queen tried to resist the advance, but he was pushed backward relentlessly. "Sir Queen," the beast pirates exclaimed, watching him being dragged straight toward the skull of Onigashima. Meanwhile, shadows began to emerge in front of the pirates. They barely had time to worry about their leader as the other ships in the fleet arrived, firing and destroying everything around them. Cries of despair echoed across the island as cannonballs from the Straw Hats' fleet obliterated Kaido's port and ships. More ships began crashing to the ground at that moment, slamming into the waters or landing on the island's terrain, right in the middle of the beast pirates and Big Mom's fleet. Some ships had already been destroyed, while the remaining ones struggled to counter the Straw Hats' fleet. The final impact came from the islands drawing closer to the waters, overwhelming the smaller ships. "They've arrived. They're here!" The beast pirates and Big Mom's crew shouted, observing the scene with growing alarm. The beast pirates analyzed the situation, pointing their weapons and readying their swords against the enemies who had finally landed on Onigashima. On the other side, 18,000 pirates from the invading fleet disembarked from their ships, aiming their weapons at the defenders. The battle was now inevitable, as both sides prepared for the imminent clash. The Black Pearl continued dragging Queen across the island as he strained to resist the ship's weight, while Bepo steered it relentlessly against him. This continued until the ship finally reached the heart of Onigashima, crashing through its walls. The main ship of the Straw Hats breached the structure, entering a zone resembling a small city. The area trembled as Luffy, his companions, Kaido, and Big Mom engaged in a brutal clash of hockey, each side vying for dominance. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of Onigashima, Wano's forces finally breached the island's defenses. They pushed through gaps in the fortifications with swords and weapons, catching Kaido's subordinates by surprise. Both sides braced for a direct confrontation. In the midst of the intense Heiki explosions, the intensity began to wane. The deafening roar of power subsided as the clashes of haka concealed each other out. Yet Kaido clenched his teeth, glaring outward. "Things don't seem to be going too well for you, Kaido," Luffy taunted, standing before the two Yonko. "The Wano army and my fleet have finally reached the island, and now my fleet is here. Let's see how your men handle this," he mocked. "You think you've already won this war?" Kaido growled, slamming his weapon into the ground as the area shook violently. "They may have gotten in, but the ones who will win this war will be us." Chapter 460, Fleet Advance 03. Third-person POV. New word. Quickly, the soldiers of Wano emerged from the flanks of Onigashima, advancing with war cries, while a group of beast pirates, accompanied by several of Big Mom's soldiers, appeared wielding swords and blades, ready to confront the attack coming from the icy sea. The enemies began firing their weapons rapidly, while the Wano soldiers responded by aiming their own long-range weapons and shooting back. At the same time, sword-wielding warriors charged through the crowd. Some were struck down and killed, but they retaliated, taking out enemy forces as they closed in on the pirates. Shiva, Nojiko, and Chaochu led the assault as a castle began to materialize at the entrance out of nowhere. Inside, various figures appeared in the windows. They were all members of the mafia led by Capone Beige, armed with different kinds of bazookas aimed at the advancing enemies. "I won't let them get through here," exclaimed Beige from the castle's facade, before his men unleashed a barrage of firepower. More and more enemy soldiers began firing from the castle, which resembled a giant fortress at Onagashima's entrance. Shiva acted quickly as bullets rained down on the crowd. She created a shield of ice, a wall, between Wano's army and the enemies ahead. This halted the Allied forces' advance but also protected the Wano soldiers as gunfire and explosions battered the ice without damaging it. The enemies tried to breach it, but neither side could penetrate the barrier Shiva had created, forcing Wano's 30,000 troops to halt their advance. Suddenly, a blue-haired woman, Nojiko, dashed along the side of the wall. She caused the ground beside the ice wall to explode as she stepped again, generating a chain of detonations to propel herself forward. The explosions created by her bomb fruit pushed her at high speed straight toward the castle. Before the enemies could react, Nojiko burst into the castle, blowing up the entrance walls as Beej grimaced in pain and growled. "They're wrecking everything," shouted one of the men inside the castle as explosions erupted everywhere while Nojiko tore through the floors, destroying everything. Men screamed in surprise at the invader as Nojiko continued moving from room to room, decimating all of Beej's soldiers. Capone Beej, already stunned by the intruder in his castle, was even more shocked when a gigantic dog leaped over the ice wall. It was Chaochu, transformed into Cerberus, unleashing devastating attacks with each of his heads, destroying large portions of the castle and its towers. "Beej, you bastard!" Another figure entered the fray, Kid, charging furiously toward Beej. Kid leaped over the wall, his hand bristling with assembled weaponry powered by his magnetism. Both Chaochu's and Kid's attacks began to bring the castle down, inflicting immense pain on Beej. Feeling the impact, Beej tried to counterattack, but it was too late. Shiva appeared above him, launching a direct aerial assault that pierced the castle with a freezing ray, spreading ice all around. Beej made one final grimace before his body was frozen solid, as the castle partially exploded. Chaochu, Kid, and Shiva continued their assault on the immense castle ahead, while the red scabbards leaped over the wall, observing the frozen castle before them, with no further battles to fight. An explosion erupted behind the castle on the first floor as Nojiko emerged from it, having created an opening for Wano's soldiers to bypass and advance. The entry and exit routes created by her bomb fruit powers allowed Wano's soldiers to enter the castle and emerge on the other side of the frozen structure, catching the beast pirates by surprise. These enemies were soon overwhelmed by the Straw Hats, who led the charge in the next moment when the greatest resistance was no longer on this side. "We're losing ground. Fall back and regroup," shouted one of the beast pirates as he noticed their numbers dwindling rapidly. Massive chunks of ice, lightning, and fire flew through the air, wreaking havoc all around. Nojiko was in the thick of the chaos, blowing up every enemy she encountered, while Kid unleashed his own attacks. Meanwhile, the red scabbards had also joined the fray. Finally, Wano's army breached Onigashima, continuing their relentless advance against the enemies still inside. The battle was only just beginning. "For Wano! We'll defeat Kaido! We're here to free Wano!" The cries rang out as Wano's army charged forward with ferocity. The situation wasn't looking good outside Onigashima either. All the ships of the Straw Hat Fleet were now positioned in front of the island, crushing many of the enemy vessels. The crew aboard each ship watched excitedly, while the beast pirates and Big Mom's subordinates, under Queen's direct command, looked on in frustration as their ships were destroyed. Over 110 Allied vessels surrounded Onigashima, including 2 islands. "Damn it, they've arrived," muttered one of the enemy pirates. "Boss Queen, what should we do?" they asked, though Queen was nowhere to be seen at that moment. Suddenly, an explosion erupted as a man emerged from beneath the Black Pearl. He landed a short distance away, his face twisted in frustration. "We have no choice. Get ready to fight," he exclaimed, as the pirates began organizing themselves. 40,000 men stood prepared to face the invading fleet. "Spare no effort. Use every Akuma no Mi we've stockpiled," Queen commanded. In the next moment, thousands of beast soldiers began transforming into various beasts. Using the artificial fruits they had acquired, they emitted animalistic roars as their transformations completed. The beast pirates became far stronger than Big Mom's subordinates, who could only watch in awe as their allies gained incredible strength before the enemy. "Looks like we've got a pack of animals here," Frankie commented, stepping out of the tank and looking toward Kaido's army behind the ship, which had dragged Queen's forces along as they passed. "They have so many artificial zoans? Based on the odds, the success rate should be low, so how many fruits did they produce to achieve all this?" Chopper exclaimed in astonishment. "This must be the result of 20 years ruling Wano." Robin murmured as she assessed the situation. Kaido's dream has always been to build the largest fleet in the world, entirely composed of beasts, and it's clear he took the dream very seriously, Jinbei added, his expression critical. Meanwhile, Bippo was guiding the islands toward Onigashima, following Luffy's orders about the first clash on this side, where most of the beasts were concentrated. "The islands are getting closer," muttered one of the beast pirates as he saw them connect to Onigashima, pushing aside anything in their path. "Why would they bring islands here?" another asked, staring at the tropical forest on each island. "Wait. Do you hear that?" Footsteps. Someone pointed toward the trees, which began toppling in the middle of the island as if something massive, more than just one, was barreling through. At that moment, deep within Onigashima, Kaido turned his gaze, sensing something with his haki, while Luffy broke into a confident grin at the dragon's expression. "You think you've got a crew full of beasts, Kaido? Let me tell you, your crew isn't the only one made of beasts. And it's not the strongest either," he declared. Kaido raised an eyebrow, surprised by the enemy captain's confidence, clueless about what was happening. Outside. Suddenly, all the surrounding forests shook. The first trees began to crash to the ground as gigantic animals, controlled by Guren, advanced toward Onigashima. They strode from the beaches to the island with incredible force, dwarfing the beast pirates members, whose Zoans were only 2 to 3 meters tall. The animals from the islands ranged from 15 to 30 meters in height. Animals! Queen gasped, utterly stunned. But what was most surprising was the other island, another attacking force led by a transformed Page One, bringing with him different types of dinosaurs charging into battle. The beast pirates looked on in shock at the creatures advancing toward them from both sides, fear creeping in as the ground trembled with their approach. Even Big Mom's crew members were stunned by the sight, especially upon recognizing Page One leading the massive animals. In the next moment, the dinosaurs and animals stormed into Onigashima, charging against the beast pirates and Big Mom's forces. Even the Zoan users felt small and powerless before the gigantic creatures that trampled and hurled them aside. "Don't let them through!" shouted the beast pirates as they rushed toward a giant elephant, only to be struck by its powerful trunk before they could get close. The impact sent them flying like rockets, crashing into the ground unconscious. "They're too strong," cried out a man who had transformed but was promptly flattened into the ground by the paw of a giant lion. "Help!" A leopard tried to flee, but a velociraptor caught up to him, sinking its teeth into his side. "Page One! Why are you doing this?" Queen shouted, watching in horror as Page One began devastating the troops, forcing them to retreat. Page One didn't respond to Queen, his gaze unwavering as he continued attacking those who were once his comrades. He didn't need to justify his actions. Across the battlefield, the entire fleet watched as the prehistoric and regular animals began pushing back the crowd of beast pirates, clearing the way. At the same time, Usopp, transformed into Bahamut, soared over the fleet, unleashing beams of light upon the enemy masses. "Come on! They're opening the way for us, but we can't let them do it all alone," shouted one of the allied fleet members. Quickly, the crews from the ships began advancing as well, while 18,000 allied soldiers, alongside the animals, charged toward the island, eager to join the fight. Queen, tasked with stopping the enemy advance, stood dumbfounded. The true war had begun. The beast pirates were retreating further into Onigashima, unable to withstand the onslaught. "Let's go!" Lola exclaimed, leaping from the Black Pearl, determined to reach Luffy and the others. "I won't let you pass." Queen appeared at that moment, attempting to stop her, determined not to allow more enemy reinforcements to disrupt his boss, Kaido. Suddenly, a figure leaped directly from the ship toward Queen, who was now in his ancient form. It was Hugo, who clenched his fist and charged forward with immense strength, using haki to deliver a blow that sent Queen staggering back from the impact. Meanwhile, Lola managed to slip past, racing toward Luffy and the others. She darted through the beast pirates, dodging attacks and leaping into the air as bullets whizzed by, narrowly missing her. That wraps up this part of What If There Was a Different Luffy. Thanks so much for listening. As always, new parts drop every 4 days, so be sure to stay tuned. Just a quick reminder, this story, What If There Was a Different Luffy, is going on hold soon as we have almost caught up with the author. So once again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the next project should be here on the channel. I'm currently considering these 3 fanfics. What if Ichigo awoke his true powers? What if Mangaka in One Piece world? What if Reborn is Gohan in future timeline? Let me know which one you'd like to see next by voting in the poll. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and please consider supporting the original author as well. See you in the next one.